Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now, we begin. I've been driving these highways for over 20 years now, hauling loads from coast to coast across America. In all that time, I've learned one thing: if you don't respect the road, it'll swallow you whole. I've seen good truckers break down because they didn't know when to stop. Young drivers wrapping themselves around curves because they trusted their brakes too much. And even some fools who thought they could outsmart their dispatcher and ended up disappearing into the void. I'm not one of those guys. Never been one to take stupid risks, never trusted GPS completely, and above all, never picked up hitchhikers. My name's Joe Tobacco, yeah, that's what they call me on the CB, but that's not important right now. What matters is that I had a route to complete. This particular load was cut timber, picked up from a logging operation in Kalispell, Montana. Destination: a lumber yard in Billings. Long haul, but straightforward, at least on paper. Anyone who runs Interstate 90 knows that stretch is full of long straights and cheap truck stops. So I had my plan. Leave in the late afternoon, drive through the night, then catch some sleep at a reliable stop. The pickup went smooth. Got the rig loaded at the company yard, checked the trailer, everything was secure. Timber stacked neat and tight, tarps properly tied down, nothing loose. The smell of fresh sawdust was still strong, which gave me some relief. I've hauled worse loads before, like that fish shipment that left my truck stinking for days if something went wrong. Before hitting the road, I checked my paperwork and documents on the dashboard. CB radio was working, cell phone charged, got my thermos full of black coffee just the way I like it, and a container of gas station sandwiches next to me. Everything ready. Left the yard at 5 in the evening, sun still high in the Montana sky. First part of the trip was smooth sailing, just like I expected. The truck glided on fresh asphalt, and the highway was empty except for a few four-wheelers here and there. Anyone who drives long distances knows that when the road's like this, it's almost an invitation to let your mind wander. Problem is, when you're driving alone, your head doesn't take long to start keeping itself company. That's why I fired up the CB and called out to any fellow drivers on the frequency. Any brothers out there listening, silence. I switched channels and tried again. Any drivers on I-90, nothing. Strange, there's always someone listening, even if it's just to shoot the breeze. But whatever. The sky was starting to darken, and I knew in a few hours I'd find other drivers at the truck stops along the highway. Important thing was to keep moving, and that's exactly what I did. That night, I didn't know yet that this silence on the radio would be the least of my problems. Night fell fast. Interstate 90 is a road of extremes. During the day, the sun beats down hard and the landscape is always the same. Wheat fields, cattle ranches, and the occasional forgotten town in the middle of nowhere. But when night comes, everything changes. The darkness swallows the highway, and suddenly there's nothing but headlights cutting through the black and the rumble of the engine breaking the silence. I was about 4 hours into the drive when I passed through Livingston. Made a quick stop at a truck stop I knew, just to stretch my legs and grab more coffee. Nothing unusual. A few trucks parked, sleepy attendants, and a stray dog sleeping near the fuel pumps. That's where I had a quick chat with another driver, an older guy with graying hair, leaning against the hood of his Peterbilt. "Where you coming from, brother?" I asked, just making conversation. "Up from Wyoming," he answered, lighting up a cigarette. "But this stretch here always gives me the creeps when I drive it at night." "How so?" He let the smoke out slow, like he was thinking carefully before answering. "I don't know, man. Always feel like something's watching when I hit this section in the middle of the night." That stuck in my head, but I climbed back into the truck. Old-timers love telling ghost stories, so I didn't think much of it. Left the truck stop and kept rolling. The highway was getting more and more deserted, which was expected at this hour. Anyone who's not in a hurry has already stopped to rest. The ones still rolling are either trying to make deadlines or, like me, used to driving through the night. I spent more time trying to get conversation going on the CB, but no responses. On my cell, the signal kept cutting in and out, which was normal for that area too. That's when I heard the first noise, faint, muffled, coming from the trailer. At first, I didn't pay attention. Timber always creaks and groans, especially in a heavy truck, but after a few minutes, I heard it again. This time it was different. Sounds crazy to say this, but the noise sounded like crying. It wasn't normal creaking or cargo shifting. It was low, constant, like someone sobbing quietly inside the trailer. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My eyes stayed fixed on the road, but my mind was back there with the load. "I'm tired," I thought. "It's all in your head." Even so, I turned down the radio volume. The sound continued. I sped up, trying to distract myself, but now the noise seemed closer. And that's when I saw it in the corner of my mirror. The tarp on the trailer moved like something inside had bumped against it. My heart jumped in my chest. Couldn't be the wind. The tarp was tied down tight, stretched and secured to the hooks. If it moved, something had pushed it from the inside. I accelerated. The crying got louder, and for the first time on that trip, I started thinking maybe that trucker at the stop was right. My fingers gripped the wheel so tight I felt my knuckles go white. Whatever was happening back there didn't make sense. I knew my load. I watched the timber get stacked and tied down. There was nothing back there, just cut logs, nothing that could cry, nothing that could push the tarp from inside. So why the hell had that happened? I sped up, not from fear, at least that's what I wanted to believe, but because I wanted to get out of that deserted stretch fast. The closer to a truck stop or town, the better. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the sound continued. The crying was faint, muffled, but it wouldn't stop. Sounded like a small child, like someone back there was sobbing quietly. And the worst part, it seemed to be getting closer. Now the sound wasn't just coming from the trailer. It was closer to the cab, louder, clearer. I checked the dashboard. The truck was running normal, no mechanical problem alerts. But right then, I didn't care about the engine. I wanted to know who was crying, or better yet, what was crying. Part of me said to keep driving, get to somewhere busy, and only then check the load. But another part of me, maybe the more rational part, knew I couldn't ignore this forever. If there was an animal trapped in the trailer, if someone had gotten in without me noticing, if somehow something had been loaded along with the timber, I needed to know. I took a deep breath before making my decision. I was going to stop. The red lights of a truck stop appeared on the horizon, and it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't alone on the road anymore. The truck stop looked small, but at least there were a few trucks parked there, which gave me a bit more security. I hit the brakes slowly, downshifted, and pulled in. As soon as I shut off the engine, the crying stopped. The silence was so sudden my skin crawled. I rolled down the window and listened. Nothing. No sound except the distant hum of the truck, stopped lights, and noise from a radio playing some country music coming from the diner. I looked in my mirror. The trailer tarp was still, no sign of movement. For a moment, I felt like an idiot. Was I so tired I'd started hearing things? Was that it? There was only one way to be sure. I grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard, unlocked the door, and climbed down. The night air was cold, the smell of diesel fuel and dust filling the air. I walked around the truck and approached the trailer. The tarp was secure, no tears or openings. Even so, I needed a moment before I got the courage to pull the lever to open it up. It gave way with a sharp snap. I shined the light inside, and then I saw it. The timber logs were just like they'd been loaded, tied down, organized. Nothing out of place. No animal, no person hiding, nothing that could have made that noise. But there, right in the middle of the stacked timber, was something that shouldn't have been there. An old doll, dirty, made of cloth, thrown between the logs like it had been forgotten. I didn't touch it, but the instant I saw that thing, something inside me screamed to close the trailer and get out of there as fast as possible. My first instinct was to slam the trailer shut. I can't explain why, but seeing that doll thrown there in the middle of the timber gave me a chill that shot up my spine and locked my breathing for a second. That thing shouldn't have been there. I tried to think rationally. Maybe someone at the lumber mill had dropped it by accident. Maybe it had been stuck in some corner of the truck and only now had worked loose. But at the same time, it didn't make sense. The doll was dirty, old, but didn't look damaged like something that had spent days getting bounced around inside a truck loaded with timber. And the strangest part, it wasn't just lying there any old way. It was sitting up, leaning against the timber, like someone had placed it there on purpose. I stepped back and felt the cold night air hit my face. "Everything all right there, brother?" The voice came from behind me and nearly made me jump out of my skin. I spun around fast and saw another trucker standing near the fuel pumps. He was short, pot-bellied, wearing a faded cap and holding a cup of coffee. Looked like one of those old-school drivers who knows every pothole on the highway. "Everything's fine," I answered, trying to sound natural. He took a sip of coffee and looked at the open trailer. "What you hauling?" Timber picked it up in Kalispell, taking it to Billings. The man nodded like he'd done that route before. "Why'd you stop?" I looked at the doll still sitting there in the middle of the load. I felt a strange tightness in my chest before answering. "Thought I heard a strange noise," I said, choosing my words carefully. Didn't want to sound like a lunatic. The trucker frowned. "What kind of noise?" I hesitated for a second, then let it out. "Crying." His reaction was immediate. He stopped drinking his coffee and stared at me seriously, like he was trying to decide if I was joking or not. The silence lasted an uncomfortable amount of time. Then he lowered his voice and said, "Close that trailer and keep moving." The way he said that made my blood run cold. "What do you mean? You ever hear anything like that before?" He looked around like he didn't want anyone else to hear. Then he stepped closer and said, "Once, about 10 years ago, I stopped at a truck stop near Bozeman and heard a driver telling a story. Said he picked up a load of timber in Montana, and in the middle of the highway started hearing noises. My chest tightened. Crying noises, the trucker nodded. He figured it was all in his head, but when he opened the trailer, he found a doll. My stomach turned over, just like me. What did he do? I asked. The man pushed his cap down on his head and took a deep breath. Threw the doll away and kept driving. But the next day, when he stopped to sleep again, the doll was back in the load. A chill ran through my whole body. You're messing with me. Wish I was kidding, but they say that driver never made it to his destination. His truck was found rolled over on the shoulder near a stretch of thick woods. I swallowed hard, and the trucker drained his coffee in one gulp, then threw the cup on the ground and looked straight at me. Never found him. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I looked back at the doll. The same bad feeling took hold of me. Listen, he said, now speaking lower. I know you probably don't believe in this stuff. I didn't either. But I'm telling you, close that trailer and get out of here. I didn't need to hear it twice. I slammed the trailer shut like I was locking something inside. When I got back to the cab, my hand was shaking a little. I fired up the engine, checked my mirror one last time, and hit the gas. Left the truck stop behind and kept rolling. The first rays of sun were starting to appear on the horizon when I finally rolled into Billings. The smell of wet earth filled the cab, mixed with diesel and cold coffee in the cup holder. The CB was still quiet, and my cell still had no signal, but none of that mattered. I just wanted to drop this load and get out of there. After what happened at the truck stop, I didn't stop again. Not to stretch my legs, not to fuel up, nothing. The whole time I felt like if I stopped again, something would catch up to me. So when I saw the sign for the lumber company in the distance, my chest relaxed for the first time the entire trip. I backed the truck up to the loading dock and shut off the engine. Sat there for a few seconds, breathing deep, trying to convince myself it had all been fatigue. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Footsteps approached, and I saw the dock foreman, a middle-aged man with a blue cap and a crooked name tag on his chest. "How's it going, partner?" he asked, writing something on his clipboard. My mouth was dry. "Good," I answered, voice a little hoarse. He knocked on the side of the trailer and signaled for the workers to start unloading. "Come on, guys. Let's get this timber off here." I watched the two workers climb onto the trailer and untie the straps. I stood there motionless, waiting for them to say something. If the doll was there, what would I say? But minutes passed and nobody said anything. No strange reactions, no surprised expressions, just normal work. They removed the timber logs calmly while the foreman scribbled on his clipboard. "Looks good," he said. "You can sign here." I took the pen and signed the paper without taking my eyes off the trailer. The load was all there, every log in place. No empty spaces, no doll. My hand was still shaking a little when I handed back the clipboard. "Everything all right?" the foreman asked. I took a second to answer. "Everything's fine." He smiled and patted my shoulder. "Safe trip back." I nodded, climbed into the cab, and started the engine. But before leaving, I looked one last time in my mirror. The workers were sweeping out the empty trailer, getting ready for the next load. And for a brief instant, I swear to God I saw a shadow sitting in the middle of the trailer, bed small, hunched over, like a child. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and when I opened them again, there was nothing there. I didn't wait around. I got in the truck, put it in gear, and got out of there. Today, whenever someone asks me about routes through Montana, I change the subject. There are roads you avoid not because of bad pavement or lack of truck stops, but because some places hold things our minds can't explain. That doll, that crying, that shadow in my mirror. It all taught me that there are loads that go beyond timber, cattle, or grain. Sometimes the road delivers more than we bargained for. And since that night, I've learned to accept that there are mysteries better left unanswered, especially when they come wrapped up in a trailer that should be empty. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like. But if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. After so many years running these highways, one thing I've learned: time is never on our side. You can plan your trip down to the minute, calculate fuel consumption, predict your stops, but there's always something that throws a wrench in the works. Could be a blown tire, a road closure, or like in my case, the engine giving out in the worst possible place. That day I was already running late. The freight was agricultural products leaving from the Central Valley of California, destination Fresno. Short haul, just a few hours, but the crossing over the San Joaquin River could always turn into a lottery. If things went right, I'd catch the ferry and keep rolling without delay. If luck turned bad, well, I'd be stuck there until I could fix whatever went wrong. And that's exactly what happened. I drove down the small dirt road that led to the makeshift ferry landing and found the barge about to depart. A skinny guy with a scraggly beard and a faded orange vest came up to me, waving for me to pull forward. "You crossing now, boss?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. "You got room?" He looked at the vessel. The ferry was big, but there were already about 3 trucks and 2 cars loaded on it. Nothing that would keep me from boarding. "Sure does, come on up." I drove slowly to the center of the ferry, positioning carefully so I wouldn't take up too much space from the others. Shut off the engine, stretched my arms, and relaxed. Just had to wait to cross the river and keep rolling. But that's when fate decided to mess with me. When the ferry started pulling away from shore, I turned the key to fire up the engine and check the gauges. That's when I saw the engine warning light come on. I made a face, not a good sign. Tried again. The engine turned over, coughed, and died. I pressed my lips together, trying to stay calm. With luck, it could just be a bad connection, but deep down I knew luck had already abandoned me that day. The ferry operator noticed my expression and walked over. "Some kind of problem, Chief. Engine won't turn over. Guess I'll have to wait till we dock on the other side to look at it." He scratched his chin and shrugged. "We'll be about 2 hours getting across. If you need help, there's a guy over there who knows a little about mechanics, but if that doesn't work, you'll have to wait till tomorrow." My stomach sank. "What do you mean tomorrow? This is the last run of the day. After this one, not till morning." I looked at the shore getting farther and farther away. The sun had already set, and night brought that strange silence of isolated places. The river was an endless black void, reflecting the few lights from the ferry like broken glass. I was trapped there until the next day. I sighed. Nothing to do but accept it. I grabbed the flashlight from the dashboard, climbed out of the truck, and went to talk to the improvised mechanic. But deep down, a bad feeling started settling inside me. At that moment, I still didn't know the worst thing about that night wouldn't be being stranded. It would be discovering that something else was out there, hidden in the darkness of the river. The darkness over the river was different from highway darkness. On the road, even in isolated stretches, there's always some point of light on the horizon, a distant headlight, a forgotten street lamp, a reflection in the mirror. But out there on the water, it was absolute blackout. The moonless sky made everything even heavier. Only the sound of the ferry's engine and the noise of water moving around us reminded us that the world still existed. The improvised mechanic the ferry operator mentioned introduced himself as Frank. He was a young guy, early 20s maybe, skinny, sun-weathered skin, wearing a team jersey. He tried to help me get the truck started. "If it's just the battery, we can try a jump in the morning," he said while I tested the ignition without success. If it was the battery, not even the dashboard lights would come on, I shot back, already irritated. He let out a low whistle and scratched his head. "Then it's worse, huh?" I didn't answer. I already knew I wasn't going to fix that out there. The thing to do was wait. I looked around. The other drivers were already sleeping inside their trucks, windows closed. The ferry operator and crew had retreated to a small room at the front of the vessel. Me, wide awake and out of patience, decided to get out of the cab and stretch my legs. The ferry swayed slightly under my feet. The sound of the water was almost hypnotic. I walked to the edge and leaned against the metal railing, looking out at the endless darkness of the river. That black vastness made me feel small. There was something strange about that silence, something oppressive, like the river was waiting. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. I pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and stood there blowing smoke slowly. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of the water, creating a familiar but uncomfortable aroma. I'd been there just a few minutes when I heard the first strange thing of the night, a light sound of something touching the water. I looked around, nothing. Maybe a fish, I thought. The sand joaquin was full of them, but for some reason the noise bothered me. I flicked the cigarette into the water and decided to head back to the cab, try to sleep and let the night pass. But before turning my back to the river, I heard the noise in the water again. And then a low, weak voice from out in the middle of the darkness. I stopped dead. My blood went cold. The voice was calling me. My first instinct was to check if anyone else had heard that. The other drivers were still locked in their cabs. The ferry operator and crew were in the front part of the barge. They seemed to be sleeping. I was the only one awake, so who had spoken? I stood there, still with my back to the river. My body was tense, and the only thing I could hear now was the gentle sound of water lapping against the vessel. I started thinking I'd imagined it. Fatigue, stress from the day, all in my head. But then the voice came again, this time closer. My heart raced. Someone was definitely calling me. I swallowed hard and turned slowly, looking at the water. The black void of the river seemed denser now. It was like staring into a bottomless hole. The only light came from the ferry's spotlights, creating a yellowish circle around the vessel. But beyond that, just darkness. I moved a little closer to the edge, trying to see something. Nothing, no boat, no blinking light, no silhouette. But there was a feeling, a presence. Then came the sound again, the same noise of something touching the water. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck. I didn't want to look down. Every part of my body told me to go back to the truck, close the door, and forget about it. But my mind screamed something else. If I don't look, I'll never know what's out there. I leaned a little over the railing and aimed my phone's flashlight at the water. The beam of light cut through the dark, illuminating only the reflection of the ferry on the river. Small ripples spread across the surface, swaying gently like someone had thrown a stone. But there was nothing there, no boat, no fish, just the water moving. And then something emerged in the middle of the light. The surface of the river broke and something rose slowly. It was a pale face, soaking wet, with eyes fixed on me, and it was smiling. The air left my lungs. The thing kept rising, slowly revealing a thin neck and hands that looked like bones and started coming out of the water like they wanted to grab onto the edge of the ferry. The mouth opened slowly and spoke my name. My vision went dark for a second. I stumbled backward on instinct, tripping. My breathing was out of control. My chest was rising and falling fast. When I looked again, there was nothing there. The river was calm, just a circle of small ripples where that thing had appeared. I was no longer alone on that ferry. I don't know if I breathed during those seconds. My body was frozen, my muscles tense, like they were waiting for a command to react. But there was nothing I could do. Whatever that thing was had vanished into the darkness of the river, but I could still feel its presence. The water was calm, but my chest said otherwise. Every instinct in my body screamed that I needed to get out of there. I looked for any sign that someone else had seen it, but the rest of the crew kept sleeping. The truckers stayed in their cabs, oblivious. I was alone with that thing. I took 2 steps back and let out a shaky breath. The cold wind coming off the river made my skin crawl, like an invisible touch trying to reach me. I didn't stick around to see if it would come back. I turned quick and climbed into the truck cab. Shut the door and sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to get control of my breathing. I stayed like that for I don't know how long. The clock seemed to have stopped. The ferry continued its course, slow and silent, cutting through the darkness of the river like a shadow. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the engine vibrate different. The movement of the vessel changed, and lights from shore started appearing. I'd never been so relieved to see dry land. As soon as we docked, the truckers woke up. The crew started shouting instructions, and the ferry operator came over to me. My heart was still hammering in my chest, but my mind had only one thought. I needed to get out of there. I turned the key. The engine coughed once and caught. I didn't ask how, didn't want to know. I just hit the gas and drove off that ferry without looking back. When the wheels touched the asphalt on the other side of the river, an invisible weight lifted off my shoulders. For the first time during that crossing, I felt safe. Today, years later, I still wonder what I really saw that night. Whether it was fatigue, whether it was fear, whether it was something my mind created to make sense of the inexplicable. But one thing I know for certain: some experiences mark us in a way we can never forget. And since then, every time I need to cross a river at night, part of me still remembers that pale face emerging from the darkness. That's why, whenever I can, I avoid nighttime crossings. Some lessons you learn in a way you never forget. I've been working trucks for years, hauling loads all across this country. And one thing I learned early is that you never know what can happen on the road. No matter how well you know a stretch like the back of your hand, there's always room for the unexpected. I'm the type of guy who doesn't scare easy. I've witnessed bad accidents, driven deserted highways at 3 in the morning, faced heavy storms without another vehicle in sight. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I experienced that night on old Route 66. I was hauling fertilizer from Tulsa down to Oklahoma City. It was a stretch I knew well, long highway, monotonous, cutting through thick woods and small towns. The weather was hot and dry, cloudless sky. The kind of night any trucker loves because it means good road conditions and clear visibility. My plan was to drive to a truck stop I trusted, just past Chandler, and rest there. But around 3 in the morning, something started changing in the air. First, I smelled something different. Couldn't explain what, but it was metallic, like wet rust. Then the wind stopped dead. 1 second, warm highway air was still coming through the window. The next, it felt like the world had held its breath. I should have paid more attention to that. But at the time, I just kept driving, thinking it was all in my head. That's when I heard the first drop hit the windshield, one red drop, then another, and another. Within seconds, the glass was covered with red stains, sliding down slowly like thick paint. I was driving under a rain that looked like blood. For a moment, I couldn't react. My mind was trying to find a logical explanation for what I was seeing. It was rust, dust mixed with water. Someone dumped paint from a plane. But where was this coming from? The rain got heavier. The drops hit the windshield and slid down slowly, leaving thick red trails. The wipers kicked on automatically, and I immediately put them on high speed, but it just spread the liquid around even more. My heart started racing. I took a deep breath, trying not to panic. It was just dirty water, something in the sky, pollution, who knows. But when I looked at the road, the asphalt was red too. It was like someone had poured blood for miles, and miles ahead of me. My mouth went dry. My fingers gripped the steering wheel. Worst of all, there had been no sign of rain before, no storm clouds. The sky had been clear minutes ago, and now the world around me was dripping red. I slowed down. My mind screamed to get out of the truck, see this up close, but my instinct said something else. Keep driving. Don't stop. Just get out of here. I put it in gear and kept going. I could hear the tires rolling through that red water, splashing it to the sides, covering the guardrails and posts along the roadside. The metallic smell was now strong enough for me to taste in my throat. I looked in the mirror. The road behind me looked different, like the red was spreading by itself. I forced myself to keep going. At that point, I didn't want to know what that was anymore. I just wanted to get out of there. The speedometer showed 60 miles per hour, but it felt like I was going much faster. The windshield wipers worked at maximum speed, spreading that thick water around. And even so, the glass never got completely clean. The metallic smell got stronger, like someone had opened a barrel of rust right in front of me. I made myself keep my eyes on the road, but the highway looked wrong. It wasn't just the red color. It was the wet shine on the asphalt, the way the water flowed slowly, like it was too thick. The radio was on, but nobody was talking. I changed frequencies, tried to call someone. Anyone listening? Anyone hit this stretch of 66 just now? Something strange is happening out here. Nothing. It was impossible that nobody was on the frequency. There's always someone listening, even at 3 in the morning, but the radio seemed dead. The highway stretched ahead of me, a shining red carpet. And then way up ahead, I saw something on the road, something fallen. My stomach dropped. Sounds crazy, but a trucker knows how to recognize an obstacle from miles away, the shape, the size, the way it sits on the asphalt. And what I saw there wasn't a roadkill animal. It was too big to be a dog, too small to be a cow. It was a body. I gritted my teeth and started slowing down. My hands were sweaty on the wheel. The headlights slowly illuminated the thing lying in the middle of the lane. It was a person. Someone was lying there but not moving. My brain screamed to stop, to help. But at the same time, everything inside me said I shouldn't touch that thing. Something was wrong. I put on my right turn signal and pulled the truck onto the shoulder. Got out fast, feeling the warm highway wind hit my face. The rain had stopped suddenly, but the road was still wet, still red. My boots sank into the slippery ground, and I felt the metallic smell stronger than ever. I looked at the body and then I realized there wasn't a single wound, no marks, no sign of blood coming from them. That person hadn't been hit by a truck. I stood there for a few seconds, analyzing the scene. Something didn't add up. The highway was still wet and red, but the guy there in the middle had no injuries. Didn't look like someone who'd been hit, didn't look like someone who'd fallen there. Looked out of place, like he didn't belong. My heart was pounding. My eyes swept the shoulder, the woods around, the dark posts. If that person was still alive, they'd need help. I took a deep breath, swallowing my fear, and approached slowly. "Can you hear me?" "Nothing." "Hey." I leaned down to get a better look. It was a man, dark clothes, short hair, pale skin, not moving. I put my hand on his shoulder and gave a light shake. Cold, ice cold. My hair stood on end right away. But before I could react, his eyes opened white, empty, and his mouth opened too, like he wanted to say something. But instead of sound, what came out was a trickle of red liquid, flowing slowly from the corner of his lips, the same red as the highway. I jumped back, my whole body on alert. Without thinking twice, I ran to the truck, climbed into the cab, and slammed the door. Started the engine and threw the truck back onto the road without looking behind me. The highway was still red. The asphalt seemed to shine under the headlights, but I just wanted distance. I drove for about 10, maybe 15 miles, for around 20 minutes, heart hammering in my chest, when I finally saw a truck stop on the roadside. I almost thanked God. I pulled in, got out of the cab with shaky legs, and went straight to a group of truckers gathered near the fuel pumps. "You guys hit that rain on the highway." They looked at me without understanding. "What rain?" one of them asked. My mouth went dry. I hit a storm a few miles back, but the water was red. The whole highway turned red. The truckers looked at each other. "Didn't rain anything here. Road's been dry for hours." My hands trembled. That didn't make sense. I turned to look at the highway. The pavement there was completely normal. Dark, dry asphalt, no sign of moisture. I looked at the truck's tires, not a drop of red. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd felt. And deep down, I knew something had stayed back on that highway. I drank bitter coffee in silence and went back to the truck. Still had miles to go to my destination. I started the engine and got back on the road. Since that night, every time I drive Route 66, my eyes search the asphalt for something. I don't know exactly what. Maybe a stain that shouldn't be there, maybe the wrong reflection of headlights. What I know is that some experiences change you forever. And when you live through something that challenges everything you believe to be real, there's no going back. The highway was never the same for me again. I've been in transportation for years. Cement, steel, grain, sometimes livestock. Most of the freight I haul is bread and butter work. But that night, when I stopped at the truck stop in Denver, a guy showed up who didn't fit the scene. He arrived wearing a suit jacket too thin for the cold, clean-shaven, polished shoes, and walked up to my truck with the calm of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. I stayed inside the cab, expecting the classic "friend, give me a lift to wherever." But he didn't say that, just asked, "You driving to Colorado Springs tonight?" I nodded. The guy opened a black briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "Cash up front, small load, discreet. It'll be placed in your trailer back there, already sealed. Just need you to drop it at a house right at the edge of town." I climbed out of the cab, half suspicious. Wasn't the kind of freight you pick up like that. Without even looking at the money, it was more than usual. "What kind of load is it?" I asked. "Nothing that spoils, just can't open it or mess with it." He smiled in a way I didn't like. "It's sentimental value." I felt like refusing, but needed the money. And he was already walking away like the answer was already given. Soon 2 men arrived in a car, took a dark wooden box from the trunk, well-crafted work, and covered it with a tarp. They secured it with plastic straps like it was fragile. Didn't seem heavy, but the care they took with it was what made me nervous. I climbed back into the cab and started up. The sky was already getting dark. Weather forecast called for snow later, and I wanted to get through the mountain pass before that hit. I turned on the radio, but it wasn't picking up anything, just static. Tried to connect Bluetooth, but my cell had already lost signal near Morrison. As soon as I hit the highway, I felt the change. The heat from the asphalt gave way to the thin mountain air. The forest closed in overhead, and the darkness thickened like the road was sinking into the earth. The headlights seemed dimmer. No car crossed my path, just the sounds of the engine and tires on the cracked asphalt. So far, so good. Except even with the engine running and the radio off, I swear it felt like the silence was listening back to me. The climb through the Rockies never bothered me. I knew every curve, every pothole in the asphalt. I'd driven there at night with fog, with bald tires, and even scared, but never with this feeling. It was like the night weighed on my shoulders. Not sleepiness, not fatigue, a different kind of weight, something dense. The load in back swayed lightly, like any other, but with a rhythm that bothered me. And even without looking, I knew it was there present, too quiet, too silent. I turned on the cab fan just to break the silence. The engine sound, normally my companion, seemed muffled, distant, like the cab was a place separate from the rest of the world. The dashboard lights flickered sometimes, but nothing that worried me, just annoying. I checked the clock on the dashboard around 2:30 in the morning. Time seemed slow. I thought I'd driven more than I should have. The mountain pass is short, even in a truck. And even without traffic, I still hadn't passed any familiar landmark, no signs, no curves I recognized. I tried the radio again, just for distraction. The static came back, now deeper. Almost sounded like a damaged recording with noises that reminded me of scratched words, but they were just noises, or I thought they were. I turned it off and rested my head on the steering wheel for a second. Took a deep breath. Just highway, just darkness. It'll all work out. I looked in the rearview mirror out of habit, and that's when something small, ridiculous happened. For 1 second, just 1 second, I was certain the tarp had moved, not with wind, but with weight, a movement from inside out. But when I looked again, it was still, soaked with snow, dark and motionless. I forced myself to laugh. The kind of nervous laugh you let out when you want to fool yourself. I thought about stopping, getting out, taking a look, but the mountain pass was narrow, and the nearest pullout was still going to take a while. At least that's what I thought, because after a while, no signs had appeared, no different curves. It was like the highway had been repeating itself, like the same stretch of asphalt was passing under the wheels over and over again, and the load in back silent, just waiting. When I realized I'd passed the same curve 3 times, my stomach twisted. The guardrail with loose wire, the tree with the broken branch hanging into the lane, a leaning post with a burned-out bulb swaying in the wind. It was the same stretch. Exactly the same. I downshifted, tried to look at the GPS, no signal, screen frozen, map stuck on a nameless point. I put on the hazard lights, pulled the truck as far as I could without risking the cliff, and shut off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there with my hand on the wheel and my forehead resting against it. The snow was now fine, almost mist. The cab window started fogging up slowly. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I'm just tired, I thought. Fatigue, tension, that's all. The highway is real. The load is real. But then the smell changed. A sweet, nauseating smell invaded the cab, something between old varnish and rotting flowers. It came from behind, from the trailer, from the box. I tried to ignore it, but my stomach turned over completely. I got out of the cab, flashlight in hand, and went to the back. The highway lights didn't exist anymore, just the beam of the flashlight shaking in my hand. The tarp still covered everything, tied tight to the straps, but the smell came from there. And the wood of the box, the wood looked sweaty. There were dark spots, like something inside was damp, pushing to get out. I touched it with my fingertips. It was cold. Freezing, actually much colder than the air around it. Backing away was instinctive. I went back to the cab, started the engine, took a deep breath. The dashboard flickered. The interior light came on and went out. The clock showed around 2:30. Still around 2:30, even after more than half an hour driving. Time had stopped. I started up, put it in gear, kept going. The stretch with the curve came back for the 4th time. The same branch, same guardrail, same post. That's when I noticed something new in the rearview mirror. Not a shape, not a face, but an internal shadow in the mirror, like there was a presence in the trailer behind the tarp, something moving with the sway of the highway. I didn't see it, didn't hear it. I just felt it. And for the first time since entering those mountains, I was certain I wasn't the only one inside that truck. The highway didn't make sense anymore. The mountains seemed to breathe around the truck like they had a life of their own. The curve with the guardrail, the crooked post, the broken branch, everything came back, even when I swore I'd left the place behind. I stayed silent for so long I didn't notice when the radio turned on by itself. Static again, but this time it wasn't interference. It was slow, rhythmic breathing, like someone was on the other side of the frequency. Listening, waiting. I shut it off quick. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nothing. But the mirror seemed cracked in the corner. Not broken on the outside, but from inside, a thin crack, almost invisible, that was slowly opening. With shaky legs, I went to the back one more time, flashlight pointed straight at the tarp. The load seemed bigger, or maybe it was my head. The smell was now stronger, not of rot, not of blood, but a smell of something ancient, too old to have a name. "Everything's fine. Everything's fine," I muttered like a stupid mantra. I put my hand on the tarp. It was pulsing. Not vibrating, pulsing, like the wood was breathing along with the radio. And that's when I heard it. Not a knock, not a scream, but a light sound muffled, like something scratching from the inside. I stepped back 2 paces, heart racing, breathing shallow. I didn't want to open it, couldn't, but I also couldn't continue. I walked around, climbed into the cab, sweating, dirty, shaking. The clock now showed almost 4 in the morning. For the first time since entering the loop, time had started moving again. I started up, put it in gear. The truck moved forward, and then, like I'd crossed an invisible line, the highway changed. I saw lights, houses, signs of life. The Colorado Springs city limits appeared in front of me like a miracle. I almost cried, and there were 2 men on the roadside waving for me to stop. One wearing the same suit jacket as the contractor, the other holding a clipboard. I pulled over, got out, tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come. The contractor looked straight into my eyes. "Thanks for not opening it. Not everyone can manage that." I nodded. He called the other men. They opened the tarp with precise, respectful movements. I stepped away. I only saw the dark wood of the box being removed carefully. I didn't see what was inside and didn't want to. They disappeared into the shadows of a side road. I went back to the cab, started the engine. The dashboard was back to normal, the radio too, the clock was moving. The mountains were behind me, but until today, when I close my eyes, I smell that sweet, old smell and hear deep in the silence the sound of something scratching wood. I never knew what was in that box, and didn't want to know. There are things that aren't meant to be understood, just carried and hope you leave them in the right place. After that trip, I stayed off the road for a while. Every time I started the truck, I felt a cold run up my spine. It wasn't fear of accidents or the highway. It was of what stayed with me, not in the trailer, not in the cab, but inside my head. What haunts me most isn't what I saw or felt that night. It's knowing I agreed to carry something without asking enough questions, that I let my need be greater than my common sense. Today, when I take a freight job, I always look in the contractor's eyes, always ask what it is, always check. Because I discovered there are loads that don't just fit in the trailer, they get inside you and stay. I only drive during the day now. But even so, there are moments when the world gets too quiet, and I know I still carry a piece of those mountains, that silence, that thing I should never have agreed to transport. The stretch of Interstate 40 between Flagstaff and Albuquerque fools anyone. Looks like it's gonna be easy, flat, clean, simple to drive. But after 5 hours straight behind the wheel without stopping, even the shoulder starts looking inviting. I was hauling industrial parts to Phoenix, 3rd day on the road, and had decided to drive straight through one more night, like any other. The fatigue was starting to grip the back of my neck. The radio was irritating me more than helping. And the coffee I'd brought in the thermos, had turned into a lukewarm, bitter liquid. The sky was clear, but the darkness of the interstate made it seem like the world ended beyond the reach of the headlights. No truck ahead, no car behind. The kind of silence that settles when your mind starts wandering on its own. That's when I saw the sign, Starlight Desert Diner 2 miles. I didn't remember it, and look, I'd done that stretch several times, but hunger and sleepiness spoke louder. I slowed down, took the exit to the right, and followed a dirt road. Right after a curve, there, it was a simple diner with a red tile roof, all striped, and a yellowish light blinking on the sign. It had an old-fashioned look, but well-maintained. There was a truck parked beside it, and an old car on the other side of the road. I parked the truck and got out. The night was colder there. The air smelled of wet earth, even without rain. I went in. The door chime rang. The atmosphere was cozy white formica counter, round tables, checkered tablecloths, everything very clean. An old country song was playing in the background, low. It looked like one of those diners frozen in time. A woman came out of the kitchen, hair pulled back, white apron, calm smile. "You're late tonight, aren't you?" she said like she knew me. I stood there. "What?" She laughed lightly. "You always arrive around 3 in the morning. Tonight you're running behind. Your coffee's ready, like always." I sat down, not knowing what to say. She brought a steaming cup and a hot sandwich with cheese. The smell was really good. "Have we met before?" She looked at me fondly. "Oh, honey, you always come back here, don't you remember?" I didn't insist, just accepted it. The coffee was strong, full-bodied, with a taste of memory. Like I'd had it before, even though I couldn't remember. I ate slowly. The diner had a different warmth, not temperature warmth, but a feeling of being in a place that doesn't exist anymore. Or never existed. I kept sitting, the coffee almost finished. The woman was cleaning the counter slowly, like she was waiting for something more. The music was playing the same track for the second time. A country ballad I vaguely remembered from childhood, but couldn't identify. It was only on the third repeat that I noticed. "Is this song on repeat?" I asked, forcing a smile. "We only have this one record," she answered without looking at me. I laughed lightly, kind of embarrassed. The place was all old-fashioned anyway. Maybe it was part of the charm. But then I noticed something. The tablecloth at the next table was identical to mine's same fold, same coffee stain in the right corner. I looked at the salt shaker, also identical. I turned slowly and looked at the other tables. All identical. "You guys renovated recently?" I asked. "It's been like this since always, you know that," she answered, still not looking at me. This time her voice was empty. I got up from the table, walked slowly to the door, not knowing exactly why. Outside, everything was the same as when I'd entered, same cars, same truck, same sky. The moon's position hadn't changed. No wind, no highway sounds. I thought about lighting a cigarette, but the lighter wouldn't work. I fumbled in my shirt pocket and pulled out my cell phone. No signal at all. The screen went white for a second, then went dark. I went back inside. The diner seemed darker, like the light had dimmed half a tone. The woman was standing behind the counter, looking straight at me. Except now there was something strange in her eyes. Not anger or fear, a deep tiredness. "You need to rest like you always do, then you'll leave." She said it in an almost motherly tone. "What do you mean always? Do we know each other?" She sighed like she was tired of the question, like she'd answered it before, many times. You always stop here, always order coffee, always ask if you know me. My mouth went dry. I sat down again, not knowing why. The cup was full again, and hot. The first time I tried to leave, the door wouldn't open. It wasn't locked, just firm, like the wood was pushing back against my hand. The handle was ice cold, wouldn't budge. The chime swayed without sound, so I went back to the table. The cup was still full, the spoon at the same angle, like time hadn't passed. The woman was no longer at the counter. No sound of footsteps, no door opening, just silence. The music had stopped, but when I sat down, the sound came back, playing from exactly the same point where it stopped. Not a second before, not after. The kitchen door opened. She came out. "Want another slice of the sandwich?" "You already offered me that," I said, not hiding my irritation. She hesitated. For a moment, she seemed surprised or confused. "You remember?" "I remember. I've lived this here at least twice, maybe more." She put the plate on the table. The sandwich was identical, same cheese stain in the same place, knife at the edge with a dirty tip. Identical. "What is this place?" I asked, now serious. "A dream, a game, am I dead?" She shook her head slowly. "This is just a way station, like any other. It's just that some people take longer to continue their journey." "And why me?" "Maybe because you always come back." The answer hit me dry, definitive. I got up again, looked around. The tables, the benches, the counter, everything stopped, dustless, flawless, like a set frozen in time. Too perfect. I went back to the door, turned the handle. It gave, opened without resistance. Outside, the sky was dark like before. My truck in the same place, but there was something different, a smell in the air. Strong, burned. I walked to it hesitant. Touched the warm body, got in the cab. The dashboard showed the same time as before, but the radio was on, and the voice coming from it wasn't a DJ's, it was hers. "You always come back, but you never remember why." Then I saw it on the passenger seat, the same white cup, full. I started the truck without thinking. Had to get out of there, drive, accelerate until the world outside changed. The sky started getting light with dawn, but without sun. A pale gray that didn't warm anything. The dirt road became asphalt again. I hit the interstate like someone running from a fire that hadn't started. I just wanted to see signs, cities, life. But the miles passed and nothing changed. Gradually, a name hammered in my head. Something she had said, Starlight Desert Diner. I remembered to look it up on GPS, no signal, but decided to stop at the next truck stop that appeared and ask anyone anything. I just needed to make sure reality still recognized me. It took a while before I found a truck stop. A young guy came up to me, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, boss. Having trouble?" "Not exactly. You know a diner called Starlight Desert around here?" The guy frowned, scratched his head. "Used to, but it's been a while, about 15 years, from what the older folks tell me. It was famous in this area. Lot of truckers used to stop there, but it caught fire. They say everybody died. Nobody knew how it started. It was on All Saints' Day. Never got rebuilt." "What do you mean it became a legend?" "They say some truckers still see it lit up at night. Go in, eat, talk, and only later realize they were alone the whole time." My mouth went dry, my throat locked up. "And the ones who see it, what happens to them?" The guy hesitated, then gave a half smile, but without humor. "Some stop coming through here. Others say they keep going back, even when they don't want to." I went back to the truck with weak legs. The cab welcomed me like it was part of me. The cup was still there, now cold and empty when I touched it, but the smell of coffee was still there. I looked in the rearview mirror, and for an instant saw the diner at the top of the curve lit up, door open, looking at me. Some people dream about places that don't exist. Not me. I dream about a place that existed and insists on existing for me. I've tried to avoid that highway. Changed routes, changed loads, changed companies, but when I drive at night, sooner or later the sign appears. Starlight Desert Diner 2 miles. Even when I'm sure it shouldn't be there. There are trips I make straight through without stopping, but there are others I don't remember making. I only notice when the taste of coffee comes back in my mouth out of nowhere, hot, strong, real, even without having touched a cup. Sometimes when I wake up inside the truck, the radio is crackling and there's an old song playing, always the same one. The truth is I don't know anymore where the highway ends and where the dream begins. Maybe I never left that place. Maybe the diner is more real than this life. I think I live between one trip and another. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just a memory walking the highways of America, looking for a way to get home, without knowing I've been there for a long time. My name is Jack Smurl, and what I'm about to tell you happened to my family and me in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, starting in 1973. Most people don't believe stories like this until they experience them firsthand. I used to be one of those people. It all began when Hurricane Agnes devastated our home in 1972. My wife Janet, our 2 young daughters, and I lost everything we'd built together. The insurance money wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. We found a house on Maple Street, number 1882, a charming Victorian that needed work, but seemed perfect for our fresh start. The house was old, probably built in the early 1900s, with creaking wooden floors and peeling wallpaper that told stories of previous families. Janet and I saw potential where others saw problems. We rolled up our sleeves, bought paint, and began transforming what would become our personal hell into what we hoped would be our forever home. The first signs were so subtle we dismissed them entirely. Tools would vanish while we worked, a hammer here, a screwdriver there, only to reappear hours later in places we'd already searched thoroughly. When we painted the living room a warm yellow, old stains would bleed through the fresh coat, as if the walls were weeping memories we couldn't see. But life was good otherwise. I received a promotion at the steel mill where I worked, bringing home more money than we'd ever had. Our daughters, Sarah and Michelle, were excelling in their new school, making friends easily in our tight-knit neighborhood. Janet's parents lived just 3 blocks away, and Sunday dinners at their house became our weekly tradition. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Then came 1974, and with it, the year our lives changed forever. It started with whispers in the walls at night. Soft at first, like wind through old wood, but gradually becoming more distinct, voices having conversations we couldn't quite understand. Sometimes they were loud enough to wake us from deep sleep, other times so faint we questioned our own sanity. The sounds seemed to travel through the house's bones, following pathways we couldn't see. The smell came next. A nauseating odor that would suddenly fill the kitchen, rotting meat mixed with sulfur, and something else I couldn't identify. It would appear without warning, linger for minutes or hours, then vanish as mysteriously as it had come. We checked the plumbing, the basement, even tore apart the kitchen walls looking for dead animals, but found nothing. Furniture began moving on its own. We'd go to bed with the living room arranged one way and wake to find chairs turned around. The coffee table pushed against the wall, picture frames rotated to face the floor. The heavy oak dining table, which took both Janet and me to move, would somehow shift 3 feet from its usual position overnight. Our German shepherd, Duke, a 75-pound gentle giant, became our early warning system. He'd growl at empty corners, bark at shadows that weren't there, and refuse to go upstairs after dark. One evening, we watched in horror as something invisible lifted him off the ground and hurled him against the living room wall. Duke yelped in pain and terror, but thankfully wasn't seriously injured. After that night, he refused to enter the house at all. The feeling of being watched became constant and oppressive. Even when I was alone in a room, I could sense eyes on me, not human eyes, but something else entirely. The sensation would follow me from room to room, sometimes so intense I'd spin around expecting to catch someone standing behind me. Our neighbors, the Millers, were the first to voice their concerns. Tom Miller knocked on our door one Tuesday morning, his face creased with worry. "Jack, is everything all right over here?" he asked, glancing nervously at the house behind me. "Last night we heard shouting, screaming. It sounded like a violent argument. The whole neighborhood could hear it." I stared at him in confusion. "Tom, we didn't have any argument last night. We watched television and went to bed early." His expression grew more troubled. "Jack, I know what I heard. It was loud enough to wake my kids. Sounded like someone was throwing things, breaking furniture. Are you sure Janet's okay?" I assured him everything was fine, but inside, a cold dread was growing. If the neighbors were hearing things that weren't happening, then we weren't dealing with ordinary problems. That same night, as if responding to the conversation with our neighbor, the activity escalated dramatically. Janet and I were lying in bed when we heard a soft whisper, distinctly female, young-sounding, coming from somewhere near the foot of our bed. We both froze, barely breathing, as we watched a dark shadow crawl up my leg like some impossible spider, then dart across the room and disappear into the wall. But the worst was yet to come. What happened next changed everything, crossing a line from frightening to deeply violating. I was watching a baseball game in the living room one evening when I felt something sit on my lap. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then the sensation became unmistakably physical and sexual. Something invisible was touching me, moving against me, and despite my revulsion and attempts to push it away, my body responded involuntarily. The experience was terrifying and humiliating, lasting several minutes while I sat paralyzed with shock. Janet had her own encounter 3 nights later. She woke me with her screams, telling me that something had tried to force itself on her, that she could feel hands on her body and weight pressing down on her chest. The terror in her eyes was real. This wasn't a nightmare or imagination. During this time, our friend Marcus, a former seminary student, visited and explained what we might be dealing with. "These sound like incubi and succubi," he said, his face grave. "Demonic entities that feed on sexual energy and fear. But there's something that doesn't add up. Angels and demons aren't supposed to have gender, yet these entities clearly do. It makes me wonder if we're dealing with something else, something pretending to be what it's not. The physical attacks continued and intensified. A heavy chandelier crashed down in the dining room, missing Michelle by inches and leaving a deep gash in the hardwood floor. Janet was lifted off her feet and thrown across our bedroom, landing hard against the opposite wall. Sarah was pushed down the stairs, tumbling end over end, but miraculously escaping with only bruises. By 1986, after 13 years of this hell, we were broken. Neither Janet nor I could sleep through the night anymore. We'd lost weight, our hair was going gray prematurely, and our daughters were showing signs of severe psychological trauma. Sarah had developed a stutter, and Michelle refused to be alone in any room of the house. That's when we contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, paranormal investigators who'd gained fame for their work on other supernatural cases. They arrived on a cold October evening, and I'll never forget Lorraine's face when she first walked through our front door. She went pale and grabbed Ed's arm. "There are 4 entities here," she said after their initial investigation. "An elderly woman who died in this house decades ago. She's harmless, just confused and lost. A young woman with violent tendencies, probably from the 1920s, based on her energy signature. A man who suffered greatly and died within these walls, trapped by his own pain and rage. And controlling them all, a powerful demonic force that's been manipulating the others to terrorize your family. The Warrens tried everything in their considerable arsenal. They brought in Catholic priests who performed 3 separate exorcisms over the course of a year. They blessed the house, installed protective wards, and taught us prayers and rituals to defend ourselves. But nothing worked completely. The entity seemed to grow stronger with each attempt to banish it, as if our efforts only made it more determined to destroy us. The media attention that followed the Warrens' involvement made everything worse. Reporters camped outside our house, cameras rolling, hoping to catch evidence of the supernatural. The constant attention seemed to feed whatever was tormenting us, making it more aggressive and unpredictable. Finally, in October of 1986, we couldn't take any more. We packed our belongings and fled to a rental house across town, hoping distance would break the connection. For the first few nights in our new home, there was blissful silence. We thought we'd escaped. We were wrong. 3 weeks after moving, the whispers started again. The entity had followed us, and now it seemed angrier than ever, as if we'd insulted it by trying to escape. Objects flew through the air, doors slammed with enough force to crack their frames, and the smell, that horrible, rotting smell, filled every room. For 3 more years, we endured this nightmare in our new home. We tried moving again, but somehow knew it would follow us wherever we went. This thing had claimed us as its own, and it wasn't going to let us go. The end finally came in 1989, though not through the Warrens' methods. A young priest named Father Rodriguez, newly assigned to our parish, offered to perform one final exorcism. Unlike the previous attempts, this one worked. Father Rodriguez later told us he'd used techniques he'd learned from an elderly Mexican priest who specialized in dealing with entities that attached themselves to families rather than places. The ritual lasted 18 hours. Janet and I waited in the church while Father Rodriguez, assisted by 2 other priests, confronted whatever had been tormenting us. When it was over, Father Rodriguez emerged exhausted but victorious. "It's gone," he said simply. "But it fought harder than anything I've ever encountered, It didn't want to give up its hold on your family. That was 35 years ago. We've never experienced anything supernatural since that night. Our daughters grew up, married, and have children of their own now. Sometimes they ask about those years, but I can see in their eyes that they remember enough. Some memories are too dark to revisit completely. People often ask me why we stayed in that house for 13 years, why we didn't leave sooner. The truth is, when you're living through something like that, it doesn't feel like you have choices. You adapt, you survive, you hope it will get better. And when you've invested everything you have, financially and emotionally, into a home, walking away feels impossible. But if I could go back and give my younger self advice, I'd say this: trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let pride or stubbornness keep you in a situation that's destroying your family. And most importantly, if you ever find yourself dealing with something you can't explain, don't wait 13 years to ask for help. Some houses have histories we can't see, memories trapped in their walls like insects in amber. 1882 Maple Street still stands today, and as far as I know, it's empty. I drive past it sometimes when I'm in the old neighborhood, and I swear I can still feel those eyes watching me from the upstairs windows. But I'm not afraid anymore. Whatever claimed us is gone, banished by a young priest's faith and determination. We survived, and that's what matters. Our family endured 13 years in hell and came out the other side, scarred but whole. That house couldn't keep us forever, no matter how hard it tried. Look, I know talking about witchcraft because of a tree sounds like something from a bad movie. But if you had seen what I saw, maybe you'd think differently. This happened back in 1996, out in rural Oregon. I was just a kid then, living with my 2 brothers and our mom on a rented farm. We spent our days running wild through the fields, climbing trees, messing with things we shouldn't have been messing with. And it was during one of those adventures that everything started. Mrs. Henderson's apple tree, our neighbor's pride and joy, just started dying out of nowhere. Dead branches, rotting fruit, wilted leaves, and she was already talking about cutting it down. But it was our favorite place to play, so that hit us hard. My Aunt Dorothy, who was one of those folk healers with twisted hands, said she could save it with what she called the old ways. Of course, the worst part was she asked for our help. She said we'd have to bury some personal items at the tree's roots: a baby tooth, a coin, and a shirt button, one from each of us. And it had to be at midnight. I guess it was supposed to be just some weird game, you know. But that night, we actually went through with everything exactly as she instructed. No laughing, no joking around, not even really understanding why. At exactly midnight, the 3 of us, me, Lucas, and little Danny, went out into the yard with Aunt Dorothy. She carried this white cloth bundle with the objects inside, like it was a gift for someone we couldn't see. I can't explain the atmosphere. I just know it felt different. It wasn't even cold, but I got goosebumps the whole way there, and this was a place we knew like the back of our hands. When we reached the tree, she made us kneel facing the roots. She took out this little knife with a red handle and opened a hole in the earth, careful as if she was handling something alive. Then came the strangest part. She had each of us spit on our own button, then on the tooth, and finally on the coin. It was to seal the bond with the tree's life, she said. I remember choking up. It was disgusting, but we did it anyway. The weirdest thing was that after she buried everything and covered it with her twisted hand, everything went completely silent. A silence where even the animals seemed afraid to make noise. When she stood up, she whispered, "Now it's up to her," and walked back like nothing had happened. For the first few days, nothing happened. We even forgot what we'd done, to be honest. But the truth is, it was after the first heavy rain that everything started getting weird. The apple tree was practically dead. You could see that clearly. But suddenly, shoots started sprouting from the dead branches. And it wasn't like, "Oh, it's slowly recovering." It was fast. In just one day, there were new leaves on branches that had been black and cracked before. We thought it was beautiful, right? Kids don't think about these things. Mrs. Henderson got suspicious. She said she'd sprayed for termites recently, that the tree shouldn't be reacting that way. But Aunt Dorothy just smiled and said something I remember to this day. There are roots that drink things we can't see. And that was that. The strangest part was when the tree started bearing fruit, but so much fruit. Apples were falling even when they were green, and even then they were sweet. The yard became a carpet of red and yellow, and it wasn't even apple season yet. The way it produced was just unnatural. But here's the thing, nobody from Mrs. Henderson's house would go near the tree anymore. She said it wasn't normal, that it gave her the chills just looking at it, and she forbade anyone from picking apples. But of course, we didn't listen. We were kids, and it seemed like a miracle. The first time my brother ate one of those apples, he said it was warm, like it had just come out of the sun, except it was night. Up until then, you could pretend it was just coincidence, that the tree had responded well to the rain, that the apples sprouted out of nowhere because nature is full of surprises. But the day Mrs. Henderson tried to pick some fruit was the point of no return. It happened in the simplest way possible. She just grabbed a bamboo pole and knocked down a ripe apple. I was on the other side of the fence, throwing rocks at an anthill with my brothers, when I saw her approach the tree all suspicious, like she was expecting someone to stop her. But there was nobody there, just her, the tree, and us on this side, quiet, just watching. She poked a branch, made the apple fall, and then, my God, the fruit split on the ground, and at that exact moment, a dark liquid poured from a crack in the trunk. It was thick, really thick, like syrup, and hot. But the strangest thing was the sound. It made this muffled, hollow noise, like when you step on a rotten fruit full of bugs. She dropped the pole, looked at the tree like she'd heard something, and ran inside the house. She didn't talk to us, didn't go back for the apple, nothing. And the worst part was that the liquid kept flowing for hours. It looked like blood, but thicker, more alive, I swear. There was a moment when it started dripping really slowly, like the trunk was crying. We stood there watching, not understanding what it meant, but deep down, way deep down, we knew it had to do with what we'd buried. After that day, Mrs. Henderson changed. She stopped talking to anyone, kept the gate locked all the time, and strangest of all, she started spending more time near the tree. She wouldn't harvest anything anymore, but she also wouldn't let anyone get close. It was like she was standing guard. And we started noticing she'd go there every late afternoon, always at the same time, and stand there staring at the branches for minutes, sometimes hours, without doing anything. Just staring. Once I saw her press her forehead against the trunk, like she was trying to listen to something. And I swear this sounds crazy, but there was a moment when she smiled to herself at the tree, like someone reuniting with a relative after a long time. And the weird thing is, that same day the noises started. Every night around 3 in the morning, you could hear this strange sound coming from her yard. It was low, kind of wet, like someone chewing something slowly. We thought it might be an animal, but my brother, who was braver than me, went to peek once and came back pale. He said he saw shadows moving in the branches, and that something was swaying there, but it wasn't the wind. But here's a detail we only understood later. The next day, there were always 1 or 2 new apples on the ground. Perfect ones, shining like they'd been placed there by hand. We stopped playing nearby. We didn't even play soccer there anymore. And the truth is, we started avoiding even passing near the fence. But the most macabre thing happened on a Monday. I remember because it was the day we did laundry at the wash basin, and Mom had sent us to get some wild berries to make jam. But when we went out, the neighbor had been missing for 2 days. His house was closed, the gate locked with a chain, and nobody answered when we called. Mrs. Henderson had disappeared too. Mom thought they'd traveled somewhere, but Aunt Dorothy got this grim look on her face. And then on the 3rd day, the smell started. It wasn't rotten. It was sweet, strong, nauseating, like someone had left a bag of apples rotting in the sun for days. We could smell it from far away, and it always came from the direction of the tree. But here's a detail. In the late afternoon, it started raining hard, and one of our farm chickens went missing. We went looking for it, and Danny, my youngest brother, ran ahead and went straight to the fence side. He stopped so suddenly that I thought he'd tripped, but he just stood there, staring. When I got close, I saw what he was looking at. The neighbor's body was hanging from one of the apple tree's branches, but not like he'd hanged himself. It was like the branches had wrapped around him on their own, one around each arm, one holding his waist, another going behind his neck. But the strangest thing was his expression. His eyes were so wide open they looked dry, and his mouth was stuffed with ripe apples, 3 or 4 of them, mashed, coming out the corners. And there were more fruits scattered on the ground all around him, like they'd fallen there only after he'd been caught up there. We couldn't scream. Nobody moved a muscle. We just stood there listening to the rain hitting the leaves and running down that trunk that seemed warm. After that, nobody talked about the tree out loud anymore. Not at home, not with the neighbors, not with anybody. The police showed up the next day because someone from the village down below smelled the odor and came to see. They said Mr. Raymond's body, that was his name, was found in unusual conditions, but they ended up writing it down as an accident. They said he could have climbed up to get fruit and gotten tangled in the branches. But there's a detail nobody could explain. He was barefoot, with no ladder nearby, and there was no sign of a fall. It was like he'd been placed there. The tree stayed there, more alive than ever. And the worst part, it didn't stop producing apples. It was apples all the time, even at dawn. We'd hear the snapping sounds of the weight hitting the dry ground. And the truth is, nobody went near it anymore. Not even animals, not even ants. The apples would fall, stay there for days, and wouldn't rot, wouldn't smell bad. They'd just stay there. And even so, nobody had the courage to take them. Aunt Dorothy got quieter after that, but one day when Mom asked if she knew what it all meant, she just answered that what's healed with blood demands blood, and went back to folding her clothes like she'd been talking about the weather. We never went near the fence again, not even playing, not even to get a lost ball. And to this day, when I smell apples that are too ripe, my stomach turns. The tree is still there, or at least it was the last time I went to that area. That was a few years ago, when I had to resolve some courthouse matters with my mom. We passed near the old farm, and I swear my heart raced just seeing the top of the apple tree over the stone wall. I didn't want to stop or really look, but Danny, who's an adult now too, said he felt that same sweet smell in the air. That same smell that didn't seem to come from fruit or flowers or anything that should come from a tree. The truth is, I never could eat apples again. Never again, not even juice. Just seeing someone opening one gives me chills. And to this day, sometimes I dream about that sound, the sound of apples falling, one after another, always in the dark, always in silence, like something there was still waiting for someone else. I don't really believe in witchcraft. I don't believe in curses, in rituals, in any of those things. But there's a part of me, and I don't know where it comes from, that makes me look twice when I see a dead tree with strange branches. That makes me refuse folk remedies even from people who swear it's for good. And I think that's the worst part, because it's not fear. It's respect. Respect for something I still don't understand to this day, but that I know exists. I know this is going to sound strange right off the bat, but I need to write this down. Maybe I'm mixing things up, maybe my memory is failing, or maybe I've confused some stories I heard when I was a kid. But I swear on everything, there's something at that crossroads that isn't just coincidence. I thought it was just superstition from country folk, old people's fears about going out at night, until the day I saw the basket. I never told this to anyone, not even my sister who still lives there in the village. Maybe it's shame or just fear of seeming crazy. But a few weeks ago, out of nowhere, I dreamed about it again, the same image. The basket in the middle of the road, the moldy bread, the half-empty bottle of whiskey, a Bible, and that smell that seemed to come from inside the earth. I woke up trembling, the sheets soaked with sweat, but not feeling any heat. Since then, I've had this feeling that something's missing, like I'd forgotten an important part of the story. And when I went looking for old photos of the village, something really gave me chills. There's not a single photo of that curve. Not one. The strangest thing is that for a long time, I didn't even remember this story properly. Like it had been stored in some corner of my head, you know. Like those things you hear when you're small, and then it just becomes legend, adult stuff to scare kids. But there was a time when that crossroads curve became serious business in the village. We didn't even say the street name anymore, we just called it the detour, because nobody wanted to admit they passed through there. Back then, I must have been around 17, 18. I remember working at a little market with my uncle and biking that route every day. There was a shortcut through that dirt road that saved about 10 minutes. But after 2 motorcyclists crashed in the same month, everyone started avoiding it. One of them swore his tire locked up by itself. The other said he saw someone standing in the middle of the road, but when he fell and looked again, there was nobody there. And the worst part was when the ambulance overturned. I remember it like it was yesterday, because everyone from the village ran to the scene. There was no rain, the ground was dry, and even so it went off the road and flipped for no reason. My uncle commented that the driver went white as a candle, just saying he'd felt a pull to the side, like someone had thrown the truck with their hand. But the most bizarre thing was what happened to Mrs. Silva. She was coming back from novena prayers. It was dawn. and she saw the basket for the first time, right in the middle of the fork in the road. According to her, there was nobody around, no animal sounds, no wind, nothing. Just that kind of strange silence that seems to be waiting for something to happen. The strange thing is that after Mrs. Silva told about the basket, things started getting different. It wasn't all at once, like a movie scare. It was gradual, like something had been awakened there and was getting closer, testing us. There was a week when the village dogs howled every day at the same time, a little after 3 in the morning. It wasn't fighting barks or animals passing by. It was a long, thin, synchronized howl coming from several directions. And the strangest thing was they weren't howling upward. It seemed like they were howling downward at the ground. It might seem silly, but that stuck with me at the time. But there's a detail almost nobody remembers that same week. The streetlights near the curve started burning out. One per night, always the ones closest to the fork. When they'd go to replace them, the new pole would last 2 days max, then burn out again. And Father Oscar, who was well respected in the village, went there personally. He blessed the place, spread holy water those things. The next day the basket appeared again. Intact in the same place, same shape, the moldy bread, the knives, the bottle of whiskey, the feathers, and the Bible. But this time it was open to the book of Job. And I can't explain it, but that gave me a strange affliction, like when you feel someone behind you and turn around fast, but there's nothing there. The strangest thing was that after that second appearance of the basket, I started having confusions I'd never had before. Like forgetting simple words in the middle of sentences, trying to remember names of village people I'd known since I was small. And it seemed like everything would disappear from my head for a few seconds. And the worst part was I felt ashamed of it, so I didn't tell anyone. There was one day I left home early to go to the little market, a path I took almost every day, and when I realized it, I was going to the other side of the village for no reason at all. I only noticed because I saw the church on the wrong side of the street. I stood there for a few minutes trying to understand how I'd confused the path, and I got a cold feeling in my stomach I'd never felt before. It wasn't fear of getting lost. It was a sensation that someone had led me there, you know. And then the things started that have no explanation. Like I'd hear the sound of glass trembling inside the closet, like something was vibrating in there. But there was nothing, no cups, no bottles. But every time the noise stopped, I'd feel a weight on my chest, like someone had sat on top of me, even though I was standing up. It's hard to explain, but it didn't seem like a physical thing. It seemed like I was being reminded of something all the time, but without being able to remember what. And the bizarre thing is that some nights I'd wake up thinking someone was calling me from the road. It wasn't a loud voice or a whisper. It was like when you hear someone call your name right in the middle of a thought, like it was coming from inside your head, but it wasn't you. The weird thing is there was one night when everything became clearer and more confusing at the same time. I tried to sleep early, but sleep just wouldn't come. I had that tightness in my chest, you know, that anxiety for no reason. So I got up to drink some water, and when I passed by the kitchen window, I saw the curve. That's right, I live far from there now, in another city. But at that moment, I swear on everything. Through the window I could see the same crossroads, the dirt one with the tall grass on the sides and the burned-out street light in the back. And in the middle of the road, the basket. But there's a detail that freezes me to this day. It wasn't like a dream or hallucination. I could see the kitchen. I saw my hand holding the glass. I heard the noise from the refrigerator. And even so, that image was there outside. And the worst part was it didn't seem like a vision. It seemed like a memory. I don't know if it was a lapse, a breakdown, whatever. I just remember the light flickered, and when I blinked with it, the glass was on the floor, broken. My hand was cut, and I was kneeling in the middle of the kitchen with my heart racing. And there was something stuck to my shirt, a strand of straw. But the strangest thing was the smell, that smell of stored things, of things that fermented and molded, exactly like Mrs. Silva described the first time. But the basket wasn't there. Nothing was there. Just me on the floor and the radio in the living room that had turned on by itself and was playing static. The truth is, after that night, I couldn't pretend anymore that it was just stuff in my head, because it wasn't just me. 2 days later, a truck driver disappeared on that same curve. This is in the records if anyone wants to look it up. His name was Leandro. He'd been doing that route for years. Known people in the village. The strangest part is they found the truck stopped perfectly with the engine off. The driver's door open like he'd gotten out to stretch his legs. But he wasn't there. No tracks, no sign of a fight, nothing stolen, nothing out of place. Just one thing nobody understood to this day. On the passenger seat was the basket. Exactly the same. Exactly. And this time the Bible was open to another part. It wasn't Job anymore. It was Revelation. And whoever opened it to check says the page was marked with a strand of straw, just like the one that got stuck on my shirt. I never told anyone about that. I'm only writing it here now because honestly, I don't know what else to do with this information. And the bizarre thing is this happened in 2001. But to this day, sometimes I catch myself standing in the middle of the street, not knowing where I'm going. I don't know if it was trauma or if there's something supernatural involved in all this. I don't know if anyone who's going to hear this has been through something similar. And I'm not saying I believe 100% in curses, spells, whatever. But there's something on that road. Something that's been there for a long time, that waits, that watches, that sometimes appears to one person, sometimes to another, like it's testing people, you know. The curve still exists. The dirt road too. But most of the village folks avoid even talking about it. Some swear it's all exaggeration, that the stories grew over time. But there are people like Mrs. Silva who never went near there again. And she still lights a candle every 13th, even after moving away. I don't even know where to start properly, but I'm going to try to tell this as directly as possible. Because to this day, I keep asking myself if that was coincidence, or if I crossed a line I shouldn't have. I never considered myself a witch or anything like that, but I was never skeptical either, you know. That thing about respecting what you don't understand, don't mess with it. Well, this time I went ahead and messed with it. The truth is, it all started because of a friend of mine. She was part of a school theater group, one of those productions they put on at the end of the semester. And man, there were people there who picked on her in a way that wasn't just teasing, you know. It was heavy. You could see she came out of rehearsals feeling bad. She never talked much about it, but once she told me, crying, that there were people who laughed at her in front of everyone, who hid her costume on purpose, and even made fun of her accent. So one day, half joking, half out of real anger, I said, I'm going to cast a spell to make their opening night go wrong. Like, I just threw it out there, but after I said it, the idea kept hammering in my head like something had liked that thought. So I did it, but it wasn't supposed to happen the way it happened. The thing is, I don't even know where I got that from. Like, I'd never done anything like it before. At most, some silly folk remedies, those things like turning a glass upside down with a knife on top, writing names on paper, and putting them in the freezer, teenager stuff when you're bored. But this time there was a different kind of anger behind it. It wasn't for me, you know. It was for her. I was always more of a homebody, one of those people who like to stay quiet listening to music with headphones and drinking chamomile tea. My mom always had this habit of keeping herbs in glass jars with labels, very much small-town style. So growing up in that kind of mystical environment was natural for me, even though I'd never taken anything too seriously. We live in a simple neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone, and there's always a neighbor who knows how to do a blessing or an aunt who doesn't believe, but passes coarse salt in the corners of the house every month. So these things are part of daily life. They never seemed like a big deal to me. But there's one detail. Once when I was a kid, I heard my grandmother saying that there are words that when you speak them, open doors. At the time, I didn't even understand. Today, I think about it and feel a chill I can't explain, because that day I didn't just speak, I wrote. The bizarre thing is that the day after I wrote that, little things started going wrong here at home. Nothing crazy, just some twisted stuff, you know. First, it was the candle. I'd left it on my nightstand, one of those simple ones, wine-colored, that I bought at a little esoteric shop just because I thought it was pretty. But when I went to light it to redo the little ritual, the wax was already melted even though I hadn't lit it, and the wick looked burned, like when a candle goes out by itself from lack of oxygen. But I swear I never got to light it. Then there was the plant, a little sprig of rue that my mom always kept by the front door. It dried up out of nowhere. Everything was green the day before. The next day it looked like hay, kind of dark, brittle. It wasn't even hot weather, and the strangest thing was the smell. It wasn't a bad smell, but you know when a place seems too clean. Like a doctor's office. But this never happens at my house. There's always the smell of coffee, food, clothes on the line. But that day it seemed like the air had become sterile. I even commented to my mom. She didn't pay much attention and said maybe it was because she'd thrown vinegar on the floor. But she hadn't done that. I knew she hadn't. And the worst part was that night, before sleeping, I dreamed of a stage. But the stage was empty. There was just a chair facing me. The strange thing is that after that dream of the empty stage, things started speeding up in a way I didn't expect. And then I started getting that feeling that I'd messed with something that was responding. The next day, my friend, the one who was suffering bullying from the group, sent me a message saying the opening had been moved up. It was going to be on Saturday, 3 days away. At the time, I even joked with her, said, "Everything's going to work out now, don't worry." But inside, I had this cold feeling in my stomach that wasn't my nervousness. It was like when you realize you've already passed the point of turning back, but still don't know how big a mess you've made. That same night when I went to redo the ritual in quotes, because I don't even know if you can call it that, the candle wouldn't light again. I tried with matches, with a lighter, changed the wick, nothing. And then out of nowhere it lit by itself, like really out of nowhere. I had the matchstick in my hand, looking at the unlit wick, and the flame just appeared. I jumped back. The most bizarre thing was the flame wasn't normal. It didn't flicker. It was still, straight like a spear. I stood looking for a few seconds without blinking, and then the flame went out by itself. After that, the whole environment got strange. The air was heavy, like there were people standing behind me just watching. I swear I heard a really thin sound, like when you turn on a TV on mute, and it still makes that low whistle. But the TV was off. And that's when I smelled paint. I don't know if you've ever been near a freshly painted set, those paints used in theater, but it's a strong smell, kind of sweet, kind of nauseating. I'd never smelled that at home. That's when I started thinking it wasn't about games anymore. The strangest thing was that even after all that, I went. I don't know why, maybe curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe just to make sure nothing was going to happen. I convinced myself it was all in my head, that everything had just been coincidence. The play was in a small theater at the school. The dark room smelling of paint and wood, and that low noise of people whispering before it starts. I stayed in the back, alone, kind of hidden, with the feeling I was doing something wrong just being there. The lights went out and the curtain opened. The play started normal. They were doing well, moving around, talking with that rehearsed enthusiasm, until one of them, the biggest jerk to my friend, by the way, stopped in the middle of his line. He choked, put his hand on his stomach. I thought it was acting, but then he vomited on stage, out of nowhere, and the sound was loud, wet. The audience went silent. One of his classmates went to help but tripped, fell to his knees, and vomited too. And then it went in sequence. 4 of them got sick almost at the same time. It was like they'd been poisoned together. The bizarre thing was the vomit had a sweet, nauseating smell, and it was dark, kind of reddish, like old paint. And the worst part, there was paper in it, like they were throwing up something they'd swallowed without knowing. I saw a piece fall on the floor and open up. There was something written on it. I didn't want to run, but my legs froze. And it was at that moment that the stage lights flickered, went completely out for about 2 seconds. When they came back on, there was a woman standing at the back of the stage. She wasn't from the cast, wasn't from the school. Nobody recognized her. She was standing still, looking straight at me. Dark clothes, hair stuck to her face like she was wet, and her eyes were just like my grandmother's, but my grandmother had already died. It was just a second. When they blinked again, she was gone, but nobody pretended it was part of the play. Everyone saw it. After that, it was like the air had been ripped from the place. Nobody applauded. Nobody said anything for a few seconds that seemed much longer than they should have been. And then the chaos started. Teacher getting on stage, people from the audience calling for help, students crying. One of the boys fainted right there, his face all pale and his body limp like a doll. I left in the middle of it all like I was walking inside a dream. Everything around seemed blurred, kind of slow, but the sound got louder than normal. Like the noise of people mixing with a buzzing, a thin hum inside my head. I got home without really remembering the path. When I went into my room, the first thing I felt was the smell of fresh paint again. But the strange thing was seeing that my candle, the one I'd used in the ritual, had melted all over again, like it had been lit for hours. But I hadn't touched it. And the most bizarre thing, next to the candle, on the floor, there was a sheet. A piece of paper I didn't remember leaving there. It was from my notebook, handwritten. The pact is made. I swear I didn't write that. I tried to tell my mom. She said I must be too stressed, that it was stuff in my head. But the truth is I spent days feeling drained, like some part of me had been pulled out in that theater. Since then, I never lit another candle. Never wrote anyone's name on paper again. Never wished ill with intention, because even if everything was coincidence, that woman looked at me, and I know that wasn't my imagination. I'm writing this more to try to understand what happened than to scare anyone. It might seem exaggerated, I don't know, but there are things I swear I can't explain. And it's not that I'm trying to make things up. It's just that some parts seem scrambled in my head, like I'd blacked out for a while, or like someone had messed with my memories. I don't even know where to start properly, but there are things I swear I can't explain. And it's not that I'm trying to make things up. It's just that some parts seem jumbled in my head, like I'd blacked out for a while, or like someone had messed with my memories. Her name was Marcella. We dated for almost a year, and I broke up with her for a reason that seemed pretty clear at the time. But now, when I try to remember the details, the exact sequence of things, everything seems kind of distorted. I remember her house, I remember a locked room, I remember a bad feeling. But some things come like flashes, a doll with hair glued on, a wet cloth inside a jar, some photos with the eyes scratched out. But when I think too hard about it, I get headaches, literally. The strange thing is, for a long time I thought it was just coincidence, like life just going wrong normally. But then there was a day I woke up with the feeling that something was lying next to me. I didn't see anyone, but my mattress was sunk in. And my back looked like it had been scratched by a mountain lion. And since then, nothing's been normal. What bugs me most to this day is this. My mom never really knew why I broke up with Marcella. I never told her about the altar or what I saw that night. I just said it wasn't working out anymore and that things had gotten weird. And even so, even without knowing anything, she found the doll. It was on a random day. She was cleaning an old closet, one of those that stay pushed against the guest room wall, you know. And then out of nowhere she called me, kind of pale, with something in her hand wrapped in a dirty cloth. It was a cloth doll, ugly, badly sewn, with some crooked threads on the belly, and a photo of me pinned to the chest with what looked like a cactus thorn. I swear I remember staring at that thing and my throat went dry instantly. I didn't know whether to grab it, throw it away, burn it. And the worst part, the cloth smelled strongly of wet earth. But it had been weeks since it rained, and nobody had touched that closet for years. It seems silly, but I can't understand how that doll got there or why. And since we found it, I started having these strange episodes, like blackouts where I lose track of time. My mom even started saying that sometimes my voice changed, and that when I slept, my face looked different from normal. Back when we were together, Marcella always said that back room was her grandfather's, that nobody could touch his things. It was locked with a key. I never questioned it much, just thought it was kind of weird. The strong smell that sometimes came from there, like old stuff mixed with burnt cloves, you know. But anyway, there was one night she called me to sleep over. Everything normal, we had dinner, watched a movie, went to bed together. And after that, my memory gets weirdly patchy. The most bizarre thing was I woke up on the couch, and I was alone. The TV was on a channel with no sound, kind of blue screen. I went looking for her, and the door to that room was open. But it wasn't just that, the light was on, and inside there was an altar. I don't know what else to call it. A kind of low table with stained red cloth, some used candles, several glass jars with things inside like nails, hair, some dark liquids, and the dolls. About 5 or 6, all hand-sewn with button eyes and threads wrapped around their necks. And the worst part, one of them was wearing a shirt just like mine. Exactly like mine. I don't remember going in there. I just found myself inside, breathing heavy, looking at all that without knowing if it was a dream or if I was really awake. And when I came out, she was at the kitchen door with a calm smile, like nothing unusual had happened. At first I thought it was tiredness. I was working too much, sleeping little, my head was kind of full. I'd just broken up with her, so everything seemed scrambled anyway. But then some episodes started that I can't explain just with stress. It started with little noises, like hearing a door softly close, or the sound of something falling in the kitchen when there was nothing there. But then it got worse. Like I could be brushing my teeth with the bathroom door closed, and I could clearly hear someone walking slowly in the hallway, dragging footsteps, like someone was just circling me without hurry. And the strangest thing is that every time I opened the door right away, the hallway was empty. But the feeling that someone had been there wouldn't go away. And there was one night when I was alone in the living room with the TV on low, just background noise. I got up to go to the kitchen for a glass of water, and when I passed by the hallway mirror, I saw a figure standing right behind me. It was just for a second, because when I turned around fast, there was nothing. But I saw it, I swear. It was like a person, but hooded, head kind of down, like they were watching me. I couldn't see any face, and the worst part, after that, I started dreaming about this same figure. Always holding a dirty cloth in their hand, always whispering my name just the way she used to when she wanted to tease me. That's what scared me most, actually. Not the shadow or the noises. It was when I started feeling displaced, like living a life that seemed mine, but with the constant feeling that something was wrong with me, like I wasn't whole in my own body. There was a Saturday I woke up with the feeling I was late for something, but I didn't remember what. I went to check my phone and it was off, even though I remembered leaving it charging. So I went to the kitchen and found the refrigerator open with a glass of warm milk inside. Yes, warm. I was alone that day, and I haven't drunk milk since I was a kid. And the worst part, when I went to look at myself in the mirror, I took a while to recognize myself. My eyes were sunken, kind of dull, like I'd been awake for days. And my beard was longer than it should be, like 3 days without shaving. But I clearly remembered shaving on Friday, and this was Saturday. Or Sunday, I don't know anymore. From then on, I started writing things down. Like I'd write in a little notebook what I ate, what time I slept, those things. But there was one night I went to look, and there were things written that I didn't remember writing. One of them said, "She still knows your full name. Protect your navel." I don't even know what that means, but it was in my handwriting, in my house. And I swear I wasn't the one who wrote it. Man, to this day I keep trying to remember if that was a dream, delirium, or if it really happened, because my body remembers, but my head seems to want to forget. It was on a Friday night. I'd written in the little notebook that I was going to sleep early, turn off my phone, try to rest properly. And I did that. I locked myself in my room, left everything off, made some chamomile tea, those things you do when you just want to exist in peace. But in the middle of the night, I woke up with a horrible feeling, like a weight in my stomach, like I'd eaten rocks. I got up kind of dizzy, stumbling over things, went to the bathroom with a terrible nausea. And then I threw up. But it wasn't food, it wasn't anything normal. It was dirt, black, wet dirt with clumps of tangled hair in the middle. My body was shaking, eyes watering, and I could only think one thing. She put this inside me. The strangest thing was that right after, I looked in the mirror and my skin was gray. Not normal paleness, it was a color that looked dead. And my eyes, which had already been sunken for days, seemed to have sunk even more, like something was pulling them inward. And then everything went black. When I woke up again, I was on the bedroom floor. Dirty clothes, but no sign of dirt in the bathroom, no hair, no smell, nothing. Just the little notebook open on the bed and written in kind of shaky handwriting, like it was mine but also wasn't. Every Friday she comes back. Protect the mirror. After that dawn, I started noticing something. It might seem like paranoia, but every Friday night, without fail, my body gets different. It's not just tiredness or just paleness. It's like another version of me takes over for a few hours. My skin gets cold, kind of grayish, my eyes sink in a way that not even makeup can disguise. And the worst part, I get a strange smell. I can't explain it. It's not sweat, it's not dirt. It's like an old smell of closed places mixed with some kind of bitter plant. My mom was the first to notice. There was one night she tried to stay here just so I wouldn't be alone. And when she woke up in the middle of the night and looked at me lying on the couch, she left the house without even putting on her flip-flops. She said I had another face, that even with my eyes open, it wasn't me who was there. Since then, nobody stays here with me on a Friday night. Not even I trust myself on those days. I even thought about filming it, putting up a camera, whatever. But part of me is afraid to see what happens. And the most bizarre thing is that when Saturday morning comes, I'm exhausted, like I'd gone out somewhere, done something, but without remembering anything. I thought about looking for spiritual help again, but the last time I went to a folk healer, she looked me up and down and said just one thing. That's not voodoo work, son. That's a binding made with pain. I try to live a real life work, pay my bills, do the basics. But it's like my life has been kind of frozen since all that, like a part of me got stuck back there, in that house, in that altar, in that last night I really saw her. And that was the last story of the night. If you made it this far, it's because you also feel there's something that lives between the veils of what we understand as real. So go ahead, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with whoever needs to hear this kind of story. Comment down below if you've been through something similar, or if you know someone who was never the same after a Friday night. We read everything. Until the next ritual. Someone asked me the other day if I had bad memories from our time at the ranch, and I had to think about it, because the memory itself isn't bad. What's bad is the silence that came after. The farm belonged to my mother's family out near Bakersfield, almost at the county line. We just called it the old homestead. It was a simple place, but well kept, from the time when everything was still done by hand. Machine shed, grain silo, low cattle pen, and a big house with adobe walls and a porch that caught sun all day long. We lived there until I turned 20. After that, my father didn't want anything to do with it. But I never forgot about the little room, or the man who disappeared. His name was Earl, a quiet fellow, but trustworthy. He slept in a lean-to near the pig pen, had been working with my father for about 5 years. He was the type who kept what he heard to himself, never missed a day, never complained about anything. The last time I saw Earl was on a late afternoon. He was sitting near the grain silo, scratching his arm with his face kind of droopy, like someone whose thoughts were far away. The next day, when I woke up to milk the cows, he was already gone. I figured he'd gone to town early, except he didn't take his hat or a change of clothes or his tools, and the horse was still there. My father looked at the saddle in the shed and said, "Well, he didn't ride out, that's for sure." But nobody commented on anything else. What really struck me was the cattle. The next morning, the pasture was empty. The animals had bunched up on the hill and wouldn't come down, and the pigs wouldn't eat. The feed was untouched in the trough. My mother even said maybe there was something wrong with the food, but there wasn't. It was like the animals were afraid. And it was that same day we heard the noise. It was in the early hours, a dry, heavy sound, like someone knocking from inside the little room at the homestead. But nobody ever touched that place. It was an iron door at the back of the house, locked from the outside with a thick, old padlock that my father said had been there since before he was born. It was never used for anything, at least not while I was a kid, and nobody in the family had the key. My mother got up, heard it too, and said, "Must be a rat." But it wasn't an animal noise, it was the sound of people, except nobody had the courage to go check. The next day, my father called a mason from Delano and had him cement the bottom of the door. Said it was to keep critters from getting in, except there had never been a gap or hole there. The door had always been flush, heavy, without cracks. After that, nobody talked about Earl anymore. The farm continued, life went on, but I stopped sleeping right. That knocking sound stayed in my head for many years, especially because nobody ever saw Earl again. Not in town, not in the surrounding areas, not at the courthouse. He vanished like he'd dissolved into time, but I felt like he hadn't gone anywhere. Years later, my father had already passed. The farm had been sitting idle ever since. Nobody wanted to divide it, nobody wanted to sell it. It just sat there in the middle of the brush, surrounded by tall grass and moldy memories. I only went back there once. It was with a childhood friend of mine, Gerald. He lived in Sacramento, came to spend a few days with me, and we decided to take a quick trip there just to see how it was. The road still existed, but it looked more like a cattle trail. It took us almost an hour to get there. When we passed through the gate and the house appeared, my chest tightened. It wasn't the same homestead anymore. The porch was all cracked, the door warped, weeds climbing up the walls. But the little room was still there exactly the same way. The iron door still locked, with the same padlock and cement on the ground. That made my stomach churn. Gerald walked toward the back of the house, curious. We laughed, remembering childhood, the bonfire days and corn grinding in the yard. That's when he passed near the little room and stopped. "Did you hear that?" I was going to say no, but I heard it. From inside came a muffled sound like someone drawing in air forcefully. It wasn't breathing, it was a dry sigh, just one. Gerald got goosebumps immediately, looked at me with a serious face and said, "Is there someone in there?" I stood there with my mouth dry, just shook my head. He went straight to the little wooden gate that protected the side of the homestead and grabbed a shovel. Said he was going to break the padlock. That's when I grabbed him by the arm and said, firmly but quietly, "If nobody's opened this until now, it's because it's better that way." He still tried to insist, but I wouldn't let him. I said it was my father's promise, that not even when we lost livestock in the pen did he let anyone open it, that not even when the wall got water damage did he have anyone mess with it. The little room was a place you respected, not understood. We stayed there a while longer looking at the house from outside, and there was a moment when Gerald went to the yard to take photos of the tool shed. I was left alone, sitting on a piece of wood facing the back of the homestead. And I swear, for a second, I saw a thin line of light leaking from under the door of the little room. There hadn't been electricity there since 2003. The meter had been ripped from the pole, but I saw the weak, yellowish light, like there was an oil lamp burning inside. Right then, my breathing failed, because I remembered that in the week Earl disappeared, my father had ordered the little ventilation window on the side to be closed. Said opossums were getting in, except there had never been opossums at the homestead. Never. On the way back, nobody said anything. Gerald looked out at the brush through the window in silence, and I gripped the steering wheel remembering Earl, his quiet way, how he disappeared, and the last night we heard noise at that door. The farm is still there. Nobody went back, nobody divided it, nobody sold it. But sometimes people who pass by on motorcycles on the rural road say they see lights inside at night. People who never lived there, who don't even know that little room was always kept locked. I'm not telling this to scare anyone. I'm telling it because there are things we carry in silence for too long, and the weight turns into knots. My father was never one for prayer, never talked about saints, promises, or souls, but he stayed away from that little room, and so do I. There's something on my street that nobody talks about properly. It sits there on the curved slope next to the field that became a food truck parking lot. People who pass by look and don't understand, and those who live nearby have gotten used to not asking questions anymore. I'll say it straight out, this isn't a ghost story. There's no screaming in the dark, no doors slamming by themselves. This is worse. It's the kind of thing that creeps up on you over time, like a strange smell nobody can trace. I grew up here in North Phoenix, a simple neighborhood but busy. There's shopping, schools, lines at the gas station. And right there in the middle of all that, they built a huge building, all green-tinted glass facade, 3 stories, covered courtyard, solar panels on the roof. A technical college, they said, one of the good ones. They started putting it up when I was still in middle school. We'd walk by on the sidewalk coming back from class and watch. When it's finished, that's where we'll study, everyone said. They talked about computer courses, nursing, even construction, but it never opened. The construction finished. The security guard stayed there for a few weeks in the guardhouse. Then he disappeared, gate locked with chains. No teachers, no students, no name on the facade. Just weeds growing and glass starting to break year after year, and nobody ever explained why. I wasn't the only one who found it strange, but time passed. Life steamrolls over these things, you know. You start working early, chasing money, solving things at home, and you push curiosity aside for later. But I never forgot, because every day I passed in front, and every day it seemed out of place, like it wasn't supposed to be there. When I was already at my second job working at a print shop, a colleague mentioned he'd seen people entering the building at night, black cars without plates, people in uniforms without badges, but with the attitude of people who weren't lost. "It's city business," someone said. "It's health department folks," another guessed. But there was never any identification. There was a time they put up a big black tarp in the back. It covered a fenced area. That bothered me because it didn't make sense. Schools don't isolate part of the playground with tarps. And worse, you could hear noises in the early morning hours, crackling sounds, creaking. Sometimes they sounded like muffled screams. And I'm not exaggerating. To this day, I can't say if it was human. Nobody investigated, nobody called the press. And I understand why. Here, when something seems too big, we pretend it's not our problem. There was an old lady from the back street, Mrs. Arlene, who used to say things. Said that place was never a school, that the building was facing the wrong direction from the sun, that we were going to pay dearly for leaving that thing standing. A lot of people laughed. I just listened. Over time, the facade started falling apart. The weeds grew so tall the front wall became invisible. But nobody graffitied it, nobody broke anything, nobody even tried to get in. It was like the whole neighborhood had made a silent pact to leave it alone. Until one day a friend of mine, one of those guys with a YouTube channel who like exploring abandoned places, asked me to go with him. Said he was going to film a video inside, show the ghost school of North Phoenix. I was hesitant. I don't like those things, but I went. We didn't even get close. Two men got out of a car parked at the corner. A car without identification, but with a paper stuck to the dashboard. One of them showed a badge covered by a white sticker. Seriously, a covered badge, and said the building was a sensitive federal area. That phrase never left my head because the building is right in front of our houses, has no signs, never functioned, but became a sensitive federal area. When my friend asked what agency was responsible for it, the two simply told us to leave, and we left. He deleted the video he'd started recording. After that, I started trying to understand on my own. Went to City Hall, nothing. Went to the State Department of Education, listed as construction in progress. On the Federal Education website, the project appears with a generic name, like Phoenix North Educational Unit 3. No inauguration date, no principal's name, nothing. And strangest of all, on the list of state technical schools, this building never existed. I swear it seems like the place is there, but officially it isn't. Until about 3 months ago, I went back there alone during the day, just to look. The gate was still locked, but the tarp in the back had been removed, and in its place was a metal structure on the ground wide, long, like a gurney base with rails on the corners. I'm not in the health field, but that wasn't school equipment. And that's when I saw on the side wall, half hidden by weeds, there was a phrase written in faded paint. You know that institutional painting from government agencies? The kind you see at shelters, health clinics, things like that. The phrase said, "Direct contact with students prohibited." I froze because there were never students, never enrollment, never roll call. Never lines at the entrance, late teachers, PE classes. There was never anyone, but there were rules written on the wall. And that's when the worst thought hit me. The school never opened for us, but it did open. And something was taught in there, just not English or math. After I saw that phrase on the wall, direct contact with students prohibited, something in me flipped a switch. It wasn't curiosity anymore, it was discomfort. We get used to living with what we don't understand, but there's a point when things go too far, and this building went too far. I started looking more carefully. I remembered some old things that at the time had passed unnoticed, like the guard who stayed there at the beginning, the first one they put when construction finished. He was from the community, a quiet older man, but good people. He stayed there 2 weeks at most. One day he disappeared. They said he'd asked to quit because he heard too much. That never made sense to me. Now it does. I also remembered a story that happened when they started installing the solar panels. A worker fell from the roof and had to be rushed away. Some people said he got electrocuted by a poorly insulated wire. Others said he fell on something metal and strange, too hot for the sun that day. The story never added up, and nobody remembers his name. At the time, they kept quiet, but adding it up now with everything else bothers me. I started talking to more people on the street, always in low voices. An older man who sells sugar cane juice nearby told me that in the early morning hours he'd seen cars go inside. Said the gate opened automatically and then closed again. Never saw anyone come out. A girl who lived in a neighboring building said her mother would wake up with headaches whenever they worked late inside. That there were nights she heard a kind of repetitive metallic sound, like something being dragged or scraped, always in the same rhythm. And then one day, a resident from the back street called me aside, lowered his voice and said, "You know the school name wasn't painted on the wall, right? It was attached with acrylic letters." And I said I remembered. Yes, that was true, except the letters never formed anything. At the time we thought the official sign was coming, and those letters were just a template. But they stayed there for months, spaced apart from each other, not spelling any word. He told me his father had photographed it at the time and showed me on his phone in an old, pixelated photo. The letters were there, 3 on each side of the entrance. If they were meant to form something, you'd have to put them together and rearrange them. But that way you couldn't read anything, like it was on purpose. That's when I started thinking about something more serious. What if the building was made not to be identified? A big building with technical college structure, built in the middle of a community with public money, and no name, no registry, no declared use, no history. In the government's eyes, it's under construction, but it's been finished for over 10 years. And here's the part I never told, and why I'm recording this for the channel. A month ago, I went to bed late, and around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a bluish light through the window. It wasn't from a street light. It was a cold light coming from the direction of the building. I got dressed and went to the corner. I watched from a distance. There were 3 people in the courtyard wearing lab coats, but not school lab coats, thicker ones with reflective strips. One of them wore a mask on his face. They were moving something in the back area. I couldn't see clearly, but it looked like they were carrying something long, the kind that needs 2 people to lift. And then on the ground I saw the track. You know when a shopping cart passes through wet dirt and leaves a trail? It was like that, but wider, firm, like something heavy was being taken back and forth. That kept replaying in my head. Strangest of all, the tall grass in front had been trimmed just there. The rest kept growing. That night there was no animal noise, no barking, nothing, like everything around had stopped for that to happen. And suddenly they turned off the light. No engine noise, no gate, just turned off. I went back home with the feeling I'd seen too much, without seeing almost anything. Since then the building's been the same way, but now when I pass by, I feel like it's looking back at me, and I know how that sounds, but that's exactly it. The building sees me. The other day at the bakery, a guy who'd recently moved to the street commented, "There's a school nearby, right? Strange one, looks new but it's abandoned." And the bakery owner immediately replied without looking up, "That's not a school, that's just a building." And that was it. Nobody else spoke. There are things the whole neighborhood decides to forget together. And when it's like that, it's usually because there's too much truth involved. I don't know what they did inside. I don't know who it was made for. I just know it wasn't for us. And maybe that's exactly why the gate never really opened, because if it opens, someone will ask questions. And the worst question that could be asked about that place is, where are the students? Because maybe they never left there. If you got that strange feeling in your chest, like I did when I finished telling this, then you already know subscribe to the channel, because that's what we do here, give voice to those who saw, heard, or could never forget. And if you have a similar story, send it to us. Maybe the next voice to be heard will be yours. This is Terror Diary, where what was hidden gets a place to be told. The first time I noticed my brother had changed was because of the way he started locking his bedroom door. It wasn't just the fact of locking it, it was the care. He'd test the handle 3 times, then push the dresser against it from inside. This in a bedroom inside the house. And mind you, we grew up in rural Texas, open-door houses, neighbors walking in without knocking. That kind of life that seems too safe for anyone to be suspicious of anything. But after he took that gig at that gas station on Highway 35, he was never the same. And I'm telling this because, honestly, I think someone needs to know, because he won't talk not if you pressure him, not if you cry, not if you threaten. He won't talk, but I saw things, and I have the notebook that was in his backpack. At the time, he was unemployed, taking whatever came up. Then they recommended this night security job at an abandoned gas station, a little past the junction that leads to Waco. The station never actually operated. It was there with the structure ready, but nobody ever saw them inaugurate it. They said it was a licensing problem. Then talk came up about soil contamination. Those things that small-town people spread around. The payment was cash, no contract. Just stay there at night and call if anyone breaks in. The part that struck me most was when he mentioned, half laughing, that they asked him not to go down to the basement. They said it was the old trucker rest area, but the emergency stairs had problems, and the generator had been dismantled. But one early morning he heard noise down there. That's it. He told me once, half a sentence, not even looking me in the eye. Said it sounded like iron scraping on the floor and some dry knocking in rhythm, like someone was trying to break something. I remember exactly, because he spoke with his mouth kind of twisted, like he was remembering the sound while talking. So I asked, "And did you go check?" He didn't answer, just stared at nothing, and the next day he quit. Said he didn't want to know about night work anymore, and it was better not to comment with anyone. About 3 days later, I was washing his backpack. He'd left it thrown in the utility room, all dirty, smelling of mold and dirt. I thought it was strange he'd left it that way, but he was already sleeping badly, kind of spacey, and I wanted to help. In the back pocket there was a notebook, and inside the notebook there was tape stuck to it. At the end of the tape, some hair strands. I froze. It was human hair, fine, black, kind of brittle, stuck there like it had been pulled out and attached accidentally. The notebook entries didn't make much sense. dates, loose words, numbers, but one page made me stop. The beds are lined up, but the names aren't on the plates. Someone tried to get out. That gave me a knot in my stomach. Beds, plates, someone tried to get out of where? The place was a rest area, right? An underground space for trucker rest. But why would there be beds with plates? And why would someone be trying to get out? I showed him the notebook. He just looked, took it from my hand, tore out the page with that sentence, folded it, put it in his pocket, said nothing. Since then he lives with headphones on, even without music, just so he doesn't hear the sounds around him. We had an argument once because he woke up screaming in the early morning. Said he dreamed about the lights being turned on again. I didn't understand at the time, but now I know. I went to that gas station. I went alone during the day with my brother-in-law's truck. Everything was there, the pumps removed, of course, and all the windows dusty, but the structure still standing. In the back, in the corner where he said there was access to the basement, there was a little iron door with a new padlock, really new, shining in the middle of old rust. Someone still locks that thing, but nobody takes care of the rest. And you know what's worse? A neighbor nearby commented to me without knowing anything. Trucks stop here from time to time in the early hours, go in and out, but nobody gets gas. It's sealed shut. I don't know what was in that basement, and I don't know what my brother saw. But I know that what he doesn't say tells more than any explanation. And the only thing he still told me that I never forgot was one night when he'd had one drink too many and was staring at a white wall with a kind of lost look. He said, "That wasn't a rest area, it was to hide people." I thought about throwing away that notebook. Even without the page with the sentence, it still had too much stuff that didn't add up. There was one date written 3 times, the same number, 117. Next to it, words like shift change, door A3. No names, it seemed like routine, seemed like control. But it wasn't a security guard's routine, it was someone being watched. I started noticing things, small things, like him getting bothered by truck horns even from far away, or locking the car door when he stopped for gas, even with the window open. Then one day, going through his stuff when he traveled with Dad, I found the gas station keychain. The metal part was kind of scratched, and when I turned over the plastic tag, there was a paper written in thin, shaky pen. "Second floor. Only knock if you want them to hear." Gradually it became clear to me that what was down there was more than a poorly finished storage area. And I started thinking about the rumors. People saying the gas station construction was a front for something else, that they diverted money, hid receipts, disappeared people involved. Once I mentioned this to an acquaintance of ours who worked at one of the construction warehouses in that region. He laughed, but with his mouth closed and just said, "There's stuff there nobody messes with, because whoever messed with it disappeared." There was one night my brother had a kind of crisis. Couldn't breathe, cold sweats, talking quietly. "They're going to close it again, don't let them close it." We took him to the hospital. The doctors said it was emotional, but he didn't sleep for 3 days after that. And one day very early, he called me. Just the 2 of us awake. He handed me an envelope with the torn piece of paper, the one with the sentence. "The beds are lined up, but the names aren't on the plates." Someone tried to get out and said, "If I disappear, you show this," and went back to his room. The next week I went there again during the day, but this time with a flashlight, a mask, and a little more courage. I managed to open a crack in the back door. The padlock was still there, but the bottom part could be pushed. It was dark, had a smell of dust, iron, and something damp. I went down just the first 3 steps. Couldn't see anything beyond a corridor. But in the middle of all that, one thing stopped me cold. Light, a fluorescent light on the ceiling, flickering like it was oscillating. And the place had no electricity. I ran back. It wasn't fear of what I was going to find. It was fear of what was still working, what could be down there now. Since then, I never went back, but I followed up on what I could. I saw that the land has 3 legal processes, one for bidding, one for irregular use of public funds, and another with no name in the system, just the process number, no defendant, no plaintiff, no description. That's not normal. And the gas station is still standing, and the reports of trucks stopping in the early hours continue. Some say people come out on foot, others hear metallic sounds, like things being dragged. But nobody goes in during the day, no thieves, no animals, no curious people. It's like the place itself says, don't come. As for my brother, today he works at a garage, day shift only, doesn't enter closed buildings, doesn't eat anything that comes in aluminum containers. And every night he locks the door 3 times, pushes the dresser, and sleeps with the radio on off station, just static. He says pure silence is worse. I'll never know exactly what he saw down there. But he told me one last thing, something he whispered when I mentioned that someday we could try to understand it all together. He looked at me seriously and said, "You don't understand. It's not what was there, it's what they left behind." You know, that kind of thing that seems small at the time, but grows even when nobody touches the subject. That's how it was with me. The other day I had to go back to the town where I grew up, in rural Nebraska. Quick trip, just 2 days, and I shouldn't have passed in front of the school. I could have taken the detour, but I wanted to see. It had been more than 20 years since I'd looked at that place up close. The weeds had already swallowed half the facade, the fence rusted, the gate chained, the windows broken. But there in the middle of the mess, you could still read the name, Lincoln Elementary School. It was like taking a hard punch to the stomach, because that building, that floor, that stage is the only place I'm certain I saw something that wasn't supposed to happen, not to me, not to anyone. And to this day, I don't know if we were lucky, or if we were just left to remember. The school closed at the end of 2001, without renovation, without notice, without signs. Closed overnight. Only 3 students were there on the last day. I was one of them. I was 13 at the time. It was late November, and the art teacher, Mrs. Williams, decided we were going to put on a closing performance. That idea seemed too good for a school as forgotten as ours, and she managed to convince the principal. They set everything up on the stage in the back. That had been the chapel before, but since it was never really used, it became storage until they decided to make use of it. The theme of the play was regional legends. There was stuff about Bigfoot, the vanishing hitchhiker, the crying woman, and some stories the teacher herself said she'd heard as a child. We rehearsed almost every day after class. But on a Thursday, the teacher asked permission for us to stay later to test the spotlights and costumes with low lighting. She was excited, brought boxes with mirrors, veils, old objects, everything to create the atmosphere. The principal allowed it. It was just 1 more hour. There were 7 of us at that rehearsal. The The teacher, 2 8th-grade students, me, and 3 more classmates from 7th grade. The air was heavy, I can't explain it. That kind of stifling heat that doesn't match the evening. The stage had been cleaned, but the floor still creaked. The mirrors were positioned on wooden panels at the back of the set, facing the audience. I thought it was strange at the time, because the teacher said it was for the audience to see themselves reflected while watching. The first scene was my classmate Jake's. He played a boy who went into the woods to look for his mother. And then, with each step, he saw her face in reflections from the trees. He said 2 lines and stopped. He looked toward the back of the stage like he'd forgotten his lines, but his body froze. The teacher went to him, thinking it was nerves, but when she put her hand on his shoulder, he turned with a look I could never forget. Seriously, it was like he was seeing something else. He said just one sentence. "She's repeating what I said yesterday." The teacher thought he was acting, but he started crying, sobbing, and kept saying there was a woman backstage who was hidden behind the mirrors, and that she was imitating his voice. One of the spotlights blew out. Blue light, sharp, loud noise. The teacher told everyone to get off the stage. We stood at the edge of the auditorium. Nobody screamed, nobody laughed. Jake trembled like he had a fever. The teacher disappeared simple as that. Said she was going to get water and left through a side door. She took her phone, took her purse. She was gone 10 minutes, 20, 40. We started getting really scared when we heard a noise coming from the back. It sounded like a chair being dragged. Then after a while, a whisper, like someone was rehearsing alone. She didn't want them to talk about her. That's what we heard when the teacher appeared again. She entered the stage like she'd woken up from fainting, her clothes dirty, her face wet with sweat. She didn't look at us, didn't apologize. She kept repeating that. She didn't want them to talk about her. Nobody understood. The principal didn't answer the phone. The 2 older students left without saying anything. The next day, when we arrived at school, there was a notice on the door. Activities suspended indefinitely, administration. They never reopened. 2 months later, the teacher moved away. The classmates who were at the rehearsal also left. Jake went to live with an aunt in Colorado. I stayed. My mother thought it was my imagination getting carried away. Said the school closed because they were going to renovate. But years passed and nothing. I went back there once when I was about 18. I went with a friend on a Sunday afternoon. We wanted to record with an old phone, fool around. The side door of the school still opened. The tall weeds muffled the sound from the street. We went straight to the stage. Everything was like before, even the mirrors fogged, cracked. But there I didn't want to look at them, but I did, and that's when I saw there was someone in the reflection, but it wasn't us. It wasn't my friend, it was a woman. You couldn't see her face. It was like dirty glass, you know. But you could see it was a woman, arms crossed and head slightly tilted, like she was waiting. She wasn't moving. She was just there. We ran out. I never went back. This week, when I passed in front again, I noticed something that chilled me. The glass on the front door, which is broken but still has one whole piece, reflects part of the hallway. I swear I saw the same silhouette standing at the same angle. Except now, she seemed closer to the door. I took a deep breath and decided to tell this, because maybe that's what she wants, for someone to say what they saw. Because if everyone stays quiet, she comes back. And I've spent my whole life trying to forget, but she remembers. She remembers exactly what you said, and repeats it the same way with your voice. You know, that kind of thing that seems small at the time, but grows even when nobody touches the subject. That's how it was with me. The other day I had to go back to the town where I grew up, in rural Nebraska. Quick trip, just 2 days, and I shouldn't have passed in front of the school. I could have taken the detour, but I wanted to see. It had been more than 20 years since I'd looked at that place up close. The weeds had already swallowed half the facade, the fence rusted, the gate chained, the windows broken. But there in the middle of the mess, you could still read the name, Lincoln Elementary School. It was like taking a hard punch to the stomach, because that building, that floor, that stage is the only place I'm certain I saw something that wasn't supposed to happen, not to me, not to anyone. And to this day, I don't know if we were lucky, or if we were just left to remember. The school closed at the end of 2001, without renovation, without notice, without signs. Closed overnight. Only 3 students were there on the last day. I was one of them. I was 13 at the time. It was late November, and the art teacher, Mrs. Williams, decided we were going to put on a closing performance. That idea seemed too good for a school as forgotten as ours, and she managed to convince the principal. They set everything up on the stage in the back. That had been the chapel before, but since it was never really used, it became storage until they decided to make use of it. The theme of the play was regional legends. There was stuff about Bigfoot, the vanishing hitchhiker, the crying woman, and some stories the teacher herself said she'd heard as a child. We rehearsed almost every day after class. But on a Thursday, the teacher asked permission for us to stay later to test the spotlights and costumes with low lighting. She was excited, brought boxes with mirrors, veils, old objects, everything to create the atmosphere. The principal allowed it. It was just 1 more hour. There were 7 of us at that rehearsal. The teacher, 2 8th-grade students, me, and 3 more classmates from 7th grade. The air was heavy, I can't explain it. That kind of stifling heat that doesn't match the evening. The stage had been cleaned, but the floor still creaked. The mirrors were positioned on wooden panels at the back of the set, facing the audience. I thought it was strange at the time, because the teacher said it was for the audience to see themselves reflected while watching. The first scene was my classmate Jake's. He played a boy who went into the woods to look for his mother. And then, with each step, he saw her face in reflections from the trees. He said 2 lines and stopped. He looked toward the back of the stage like he'd forgotten his lines, but his body froze. The teacher went to him, thinking it was nerves, but when she put her hand on his shoulder, he turned with a look I could never forget. Seriously, it was like he was seeing something else. He said just 1 sentence. "She's repeating what I said yesterday." The teacher thought he was acting, but he started crying, sobbing, and kept saying there was a woman backstage who was hidden behind the mirrors, and that she was imitating his voice. One of the spotlights blew out. Blue light, sharp, loud noise. The teacher told everyone to get off the stage. We stood at the edge of the auditorium. Nobody screamed, nobody laughed. Jake trembled like he had a fever. The teacher disappeared simple as that. Said she was going to get water and left through a side door. She took her phone, took her purse. She was gone 10 minutes, 20, 40. We started getting really scared when we heard a noise coming from the back. It sounded like a chair being dragged. Then after a while, a whisper, like someone was rehearsing alone. She didn't want them to talk about her. That's what we heard when the teacher appeared again. She entered the stage like she'd woken up from fainting, her clothes dirty, her face wet with sweat. She didn't look at us, didn't apologize. She kept repeating that. She didn't want them to talk about her. Nobody understood. The principal didn't answer the phone. The two older students left without saying anything. The next day, when we arrived at school, there was a notice on the door. Activities suspended indefinitely, administration. They never reopened. 2 months later, the teacher moved away. The classmates who were at the rehearsal also left. Jake went to live with an aunt in Colorado. I stayed. My mother thought it was my imagination getting carried away. Said the school closed because they were going to renovate. But years passed and nothing. I went back there once when I was about 18. I went with a friend on a Sunday afternoon. We wanted to record with an old phone, fool around. The side door of the school still opened. The tall weeds muffled the sound from the street. We went straight to the stage. Everything was like before, even the mirrors fogged, cracked. But there I didn't want to look at them, but I did, and that's when I saw there was someone in the reflection, but it wasn't us. It wasn't my friend, it was a woman. You couldn't see her face. It was like dirty glass, you know. But you could see it was a woman, arms crossed and head slightly tilted, like she was waiting. She wasn't moving. She was just there. We ran out. I never went back. This week, when I passed in front again, I noticed something that chilled me. The glass on the front door, which is broken but still has one whole piece, reflects part of the hallway. I swear I saw the same silhouette standing at the same angle. Except now, she seemed closer to the door. I took a deep breath and decided to tell this, because maybe that's what she wants, for someone to say what they saw. Because if everyone stays quiet, she comes back. And I've spent my whole life trying to forget, but she remembers. She remembers exactly what you said, and repeats it the same way with your voice. I never cared much about the places where I worked. A warehouse is a warehouse, you know. Concrete walls, forklifts, box, and dust. But there was one, just one, that I remember to this day, not for what I did inside, but for what I failed to ask. This was in 2008, more or less. I was unemployed, my wife pregnant with our second child, and anything that came along was welcome. The guy who recommended me was a friend of a friend, didn't really know him well. The guy called me at a bar and said, out of nowhere, there's a place in East LA, no paperwork, but pays decent. You want it or not? Right away I found it strange. No interview, no time card, not even the company name he mentioned. Just gave me the address scrawled on a napkin and told me to be there at 6 p.m. with boots and gloves. And I went. It's in a kind of forgotten area there past the freeway. The street is dirt, no outlet. When I arrived, I thought I was in the wrong place. It was a walled building with a little iron side door, no sign, no number, nothing. Just an intercom and a camera up high. I rang, said the name they gave me. The door opened with a click, and that was it. Nobody came to receive me. Inside, everything was very quiet. The walls were pure concrete, no windows. At the end of the first hallway, there was a gate door that led to what they called the main warehouse, where the boxes were kept, all locked with padlocks. And there was always a guy there security, but no uniform, nothing. Team jersey, cap, and his hand always near his jacket pocket. On the first night, they just told me, organize the boxes by code, don't open them, don't ask questions, and when you're done, leave without talking to anyone. The boxes were metal heavy, all with seals and codes that changed every week, like R54TA7, but never had product names, just numbers and a red label saying, "Do not handle without gloves." And the smell, even with a mask, it burned your nose. A kind of sweet but also acidic smell. Never smelled anything like it. We worked from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m., always without knowing who was going to be on shift. Each night was a different crew. There were times I arrived, and it was just me and another guy, an older short man who spoke little and seemed sick. He had stains on his arms, walked hunched over, never took off his gloves even to eat. In the second month, I already knew everything was wrong. They paid in cash inside a manila envelope, no name, no receipt. Once I asked why they didn't do direct deposit. The security guy just answered, "You prefer to keep getting paid, or do you want to get out of here?" That night, I stayed past hours. I'd gotten stuck in a pile of boxes that collapsed and was late turning in the gate key. That's when I heard the first strange thing. It sounded like a very quiet voice, like someone talking at the end of the iron corridor, behind another gate that was always locked. I went there carefully, thinking someone might be trapped, but it was a small, empty room with a sink, a broken mirror, and in the corner a sandal, just one, small, like a little girl's. I left it alone and went home early the other days. But on a Friday, I saw with my own eyes a girl sitting on the floor, barefoot, inside one of the locked rooms among the boxes. She had her head against her knee, breathing deeply. Right then, I froze. I opened my mouth to call someone, but the security guy appeared out of nowhere and said very quietly, "There are things that are lab tests. Don't get involved." I stopped not because the explanation made sense, but because the way he said it made it clear I shouldn't insist. The following Monday, the warehouse was closed. Chain on the gate, maintenance notice hung with duct tape. 2 days later, they called my phone asking me to go to a parking lot in downtown LA to get what was left of my payment. I went. They handed me a thicker envelope and a warning. "You never worked there." Fine. I asked if they were going to call again. The guy just shook his head. I tried to really forget about it. After I got the last envelope, I was even relieved to have gotten out of there without problems. But it was relief that didn't last long, because about 2 months later sores started appearing on my arms. Small things, looked like allergies, but they wouldn't heal. The doctor asked what I'd been handling, and I lied. Said it was cleaning products. I didn't even tell my wife where I'd worked. Said it was a warehouse on the east side, period. But once in a while, I'd hear a noise that shouldn't be there, like dragging metal. But it was all in my head, right? Or it was fear trying to warn me I should have done more. A year passed, too. I went to work freight after that, self-employed. Whenever I passed through the LA area, I made sure to take another street, even for no reason, just so I wouldn't see that block again. Until in 2015, almost 7 years later, I saw a report on television. Don't remember the program. It was one of those investigative pieces, you know. They started showing images of an abandoned warehouse, no signs, no identification, but with the structure still standing. They said neighborhood residents reported strong smells even with the place closed for years. They called police and forensics. What they found inside, they didn't show everything. They talked around it. Evidence of illegal chemical experiments, presence of biological residue, and suspicious structures that may have been used for human detention. Right then I stopped everything. sat on the couch. My hands started sweating because a photo appeared, just one of a room with a broken mirror. And there, I knew it was the same place, same cracked concrete floor, same gate door with bent hinges. But what stopped me cold, what gave me chills like I'd never felt before, was the phrase on the mirror, written in red lipstick, very crooked, very shaky. I want to go home. The camera passed quickly, like 2 seconds, but you could see it. It had been there since the time I was there. It was the same mirror, same crack in the right corner, and nobody had cleaned it. I sat there for several minutes, the TV still on, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. I don't know if it was guilt, anger, fear, or just that feeling that you were part of something you never understood properly. And now it's too late, because that place, that wasn't just storage. That was a place to hide things that couldn't exist. And we worked there like everything was normal, carrying boxes, cleaning the hallway, pretending we didn't hear anything. Today, looking back, I know I should have spoken to someone, should have reported it, should have at least asked the girl's name. But inside there, everyone learns to stay quiet, and whoever doesn't learn doesn't come back the next day. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.